Chapter 2848. It was too difficult for Lu Boyan. He was more of a eunuch than a eunuch. He had no passion at all. He only thought about living in seclusion in the countryside every day. He had no ambition at all. The rebellion index could reflect the mentality of the target. The system said, if you torture yourself like this, you'll only make him rebel. Wei Weibai pondered in silence. Rebel was rebel, but it did not say that he wanted to be emperor. The index of 60 meant that. She thought for a long time before saying faintly, it seems that this green hat is not worn deep enough. Self-torture made Lu Xinglan feel pity for him. However, this kind of pity and pain was not enough to make Lu Xinglan have the impulse to be emperor. Sure enough, Lu Boyan was Lu Boyan. For a turtle to suddenly open its shell, it would need some onion, ginger, and garlic. Then, it would be easy to take out the shell after it was cooked. Wei Weibai sighed. I'm hungry. Thinking of Lu Xinglan made him want to eat. The white curtain fluttered. A young man stepped in from the outside. His footsteps seemed to be hesitant. However, he saw the girl on the bed looking at him. He blushed and immediately stuttered. Are you feeling better? Wei Weibai's face was unusually pale. Her fingertips were on the book, but she did not make a sound. Yuan Xian glanced at the book in her hand. His face darkened. Lu Xinglan liked the kind of ancient books with maps. She also liked. No. Yuan Xian's mouth was full of bitterness. She liked Lu Xinglan. He clenched his fingers and saw her sitting on the bed weakly, like a lonely soul. The vitality on her face was gone. Her overly white face was a little thin. There were traces of weak tears in her eyes. She glanced at him lightly. That misty charm had a kind of irresistible charm. He took a deep breath and stared at her for a long time. Suddenly, he said, I asked the kitchen to make some soup for you. Drink some. Her stomach was cold, and her body was weak. She could not eat anything else. She just ate some liquid food. Wei Weibai looked at him silently. Her lips were pale, her face was beautiful, and her face was like the dawn of spring. The little emperor once again felt an indescribable feeling. Lu Xinglan isn't dead. I didn't order anyone to kill her. He had just received a message. It was said that someone saw Lu Xinglan at the border, but they lost track of her before they could see her clearly. He didn't know if he was a real person. The little emperor was sure that this information was probably true. He had already sent people to capture Lu Xinglan. Wei Weibai's dark eyes brightened. She touched the book, lowered her eyes, and hesitated for a moment before saying in a low voice, Thank you, Your Majesty, for informing me. She paused. A thin layer of pink appeared on his pale face for no reason. What do you want me to do? This was a trade. He gave her information about Lu Xinglan, but spared her life. She traded herself for it. When the system heard this, it felt as if a green light was echoing in its ears. After crossing the mountain peak and layers of white clouds in front of him, there was the green light. Male lead, come and listen. The little emperor was also stunned. Just now, he just wanted her to not be so worried. But he didn't think of asking her to do anything. What could he make her do? Smile at him? Yuan Xian pursed his lips. He saw the fragile hesitation in her eyes and the involuntary trembling of her fingers. Was she afraid that he would make some unreasonable request? Yuan Xian had always been cold and cruel. He had no moral bottom line. But for the first time, he didn't dare to be too presumptuous with her. He carefully came to the bedside and couldn't help but reach out to touch her face. But he saw that she didn't avoid it. Instead, she sat there with her eyelashes half closed and pursed lips. Chapter 2849. It was as if touching her was the price she had to pay after a deal was made. Yuan Xian was speechless for a moment. His fingers stopped in the air for a while before he slowly retracted it. Bai Weiwei slowly lifted her eyes and looked at him, puzzled. Yuan Xian was about to get angry. She treated him as if he was a scourge. Whenever he touched her, she would show a pained expression. But when he saw her looking at him indifferently, he couldn't bear to get angry. He said softly, Eat something. Wei Weibai was stunned for a while before asking, Is this a deal? Yuan Xian said in a low voice, No, I just want you to eat. Wei Weibai turned her face away and said softly, I'm not hungry. Yuan Xian laughed at himself. She must be too disgusted to eat when she saw him. He was about to leave, not wanting to make her feel worse. But he heard the girl behind him say softly, "It's good to drink some soup." Yuan Xian stopped his tracks and immediately walked out quickly. He shouted at the eunuch closest to him, "What are you waiting for?" "The girl wants to drink soup." The eunuch immediately ran out and ordered the kitchen. Yuan Xian stood at the door and couldn't help but smile. She wanted to eat. It wasn't a deal. It was just that she wanted to drink soup. With this little interaction, Yuan Xian felt that he would definitely make her like him willingly in the future. The soup was served quickly. Yuan Xian personally carried the soup and sat by the bed. He was a little clumsy with his words, "Come, drink some." Wei Wei Bai's face was cold and pale. She looked at him quietly for a while before reaching out to take the spoon. In the end, her fingers were weak and the spoon fell back into the bowl. Yuan Xian couldn't bear to say, "I'll feed you." During this period of time, she had tortured herself to the point of almost losing her life. She didn't even have the strength to eat. Wei Wei Bai stared at him silently for a long time. She didn't agree or reject him. Yuan Xian carefully brought the spoon to her lips. In fact, he knew that in the next moment, she might turn her face away and refuse to eat. Just as he was feeling uneasy, Wei Wei Bai, on the other hand, lowered her eyes slightly, opened her mouth, touched the edge of the spoon, and drank a little of the soup. Yuan Xian widened his eyes and stared at her blankly. Wei Wei Bai finished drinking. He immediately ladled her more soup, and she drank it again. Yuan Xian's mind went blank. He only had one thought. She drank the soup. She even drank from him. The eunuch standing at the door lowered his head and waited until everything was fine. The eunuch walked to a secluded place, took out a small wooden tube, and passed the message to a passing palace maid. The palace maid walked to the other side of the palace and handed it to a young eunuch who raised the pigeons. Very soon, the news spread. Lu Xinglan was currently sharpening his sword. His cold and emotionless face, in front of the fire, was imprinted with the multicolored light of the flames, handsome to the point of being heartless. Xian Wu read the message, and when he reached the end, he paused. He saw Lu Xinglan's extremely calm face. He continued, "Madam drank the soup. Yuan Xian fed her personally." Lu Xinglan stopped sharpening her sword, but didn't say anything. Xian Wu threw the message into the fire. Silence spread between the two of them. They sat in the tent. Outside were the generals of the border. This place was Lu Xinglan's world. Previously, he was plotted against by the people of the Northern Kingdom and was shot by an arrow, causing him to almost be killed by the killers sent by Yuan Xian. Now, he had recovered and returned to the border camp. No one in the imperial court knew that he had returned here, because all the information at the border had been tampered with, filtered, and sent to the imperial court. Chapter 2850. The royal family still thought that he was still missing. They even thought that there was nothing wrong with the border military camp. The truth was that the command of the border army had long returned to Lu Xinglan's hands. Finally, Lu Xinglan moved. He continued to lower his head and sharpen his sword. The sword light whizzed, and his eyes were cold. The fireworks of the fire illuminated half of his face, bringing out a cold and dark shadow. But Wei Wei Bai heard it. Rebellion Index, 65. Wei Wei Bai drank the soup and said with narrowed eyes, "Looks like it's not green enough." The system's ears seemed to ring a beautiful song. "Beautiful grassland. My home is blowing the wind. Green grass is everywhere." Give it to the male lead. Play it 10,000 times. If self-abuse was not enough, cuckold would make up for it. So Wei Wei Bai decided to make Lu Xinglan's cuckold more comfortable. After drinking the soup, she leaned against the window and looked at the sunlight outside. Suddenly, a young man wearing a tiger mask appeared by the window. He leaned against the window and said in a low voice, "Where did this little girl come from? She's so cute. Why don't I, the Tiger King, take her and make her my wife?" Wei Wei Bai looked at him indifferently. She was not frightened. She was not amused. This made Yuan Xian's face, which was hidden behind the mask, break out in a hot sweat. His face was red, and he was about to leave. But he heard the girl say, "The weather today is good." Yuan Xian immediately said, "Yes, yes, yes." He was so anxious that he could not speak. Wei Wei Bai reached out to stroke her long hair and said softly, "Can I go out for a walk?" Yuan Xian was stunned and immediately nodded. During this time, he tried all ways to get close to her. She did not smile much. She was indifferent, cold, and fragile. But Yuan Xian was not tired of it. Only the feelings that deepened day by day. It seemed that as long as she was here, even if she was unhappy, he was satisfied. Once she gave him a little feedback, he felt that the world was bright all day. Wei Wei Bai was about to get up, but she thought of something and sat sideways. In front of her was a dressing table. There were all kinds of beautiful boxes, all kinds of rouge, all kinds of jewelry, hairpins, and bright flowers. She glanced sideways at the youth outside the window. The young man was wearing a mask, so no one could see his expression, but they could feel his nervousness. She silently picked up the lipstick and gently touched her pink lips. Her bright red lips were as beautiful as fire. Her eyes were like silk, and just the light makeup on her face made her unbelievably beautiful. Finally, she picked up the flowers and gently tucked them into her hair bun. Then, she gracefully stood up and walked out. The young emperor wore a mask and followed behind her. Like a new tour guide, he stuttered excitedly. "The flowers in the imperial garden are very beautiful. I'll take you to see them. Also, there's a lake outside my bedroom. We can take a boat there." Suddenly, the young man's foot knocked against the stone steps. He staggered a few steps and almost fell on his butt. He struggled to stabilize his body. Just as he was about to get angry, he looked up and saw the girl glancing at him. She seemed to be amused by his pathetic clown appearance. A faint smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She lowered her head and covered the corners of her lips with a handkerchief. There was a faint light in her eyes, and the flowers on her temples trembled and bloomed beautifully. The young man looked at her silently. He only felt his heart beating like a drum. Lu Xinglan, who was drawing, received the message. He glanced at it and burned it. Then, he lowered his head and continued to draw. Xi and Wu packed up the maps of the capital city. This was Lu Xinglan's habit. Before she conquered a place, she had to prepare the topographic map of that place. Xi and Wu thought that today's message was not important. The messages from the past few days had made Lu Xinglan in a very bad mood. It was a good thing that Madame had started to eat. Yuan Xian made Madame laugh. It was even better that Madame did not laugh. Madame's health improved. She sat by the window and basked in the sun. Yuan Xian peeped. Yuan Xian, that bastard, was courting death. In the message, the girl's condition was slowly improving. Xi and Wu thought that Lu Xinglan would be happy. Unfortunately, Lu Xinglan's expression became uglier and uglier each time. He was puzzled, but he heard Lu Xinglan muttering to herself coldly. Her life has been invaded by another man. Another man had been accompanying her. Even if she was unwilling, her life was slowly being invaded by that person. Lu Xinglan continued to draw. Suddenly, the paper under her pen cracked. He looked at the paper coldly, and the viciousness and fear in his eyes seeped out bit by bit. She smiled at him. Rebellion Index, 70. Chapter 2851. The little emperor was in a good mood recently. After he made Wei Wei Bai laugh, he often brought all kinds of small things for her to play with. Together, they played cricket, dice, and paper cutting. In any case, they were all very cheap things that could pass the time. Wei Wei Bai played with them expressionlessly. She had nothing to do anyway, although these things were like child's play. But they were fun. So all the messages Lu Xinglan received were: the girl played cricket with Yuan Xian. Lu Xinglan, the girl played paper cutting with Yuan Xian. Lu Xinglan, the girl played chess with Yuan Xian. Yuan Xian kissed the girl, but did not succeed. Lu Xinglan, the girl, and Yuan Xian. Lu Xinglan crushed the paper. His face was gloomy and his eyes were extremely cold. Then he said, "Army, is the food ready? Why are you taking so long to rebel? Don't you have enough to eat?" Xi and Wu, that was how slow a rebellion was. Could it be that they were rebelling today? Tomorrow, they would charge into the palace. They had a premeditated plan, an organization, a general, and an inside man. They were not a group of people. Although he thought so, he could not say so. Xi and Wu, we leave in 3 days. Lu Xinglan looked at his sword in silence. After a while, he continued to sharpen the sword. If he did not sharpen the sword, he could not control his murderous heart. Where did Yuan Xian get the guts to kiss her? Even if he failed, it would not do. Wei Wei Bai's rebellion index soared again when she heard it. 75. She continued to play cricket with an expressionless face. Yes, it was fun. After playing cricket, Wei Wei Bai went to make rouge. After all, crickets were fun, but she could not play with them too much. She was a peerless beauty. Her hobbies should be more elegant. How could she be like a child every day, thinking about crickets and gamoku? The system is making rouge very elegant. Bai Weiwei's expression was calm as she carefully ground the petals of her lipstick. She leaned against the window, a beautiful peony in her beautiful hair, blooming exceptionally brightly. The little emperor secretly stood outside the window and watched obsessively. She occasionally glanced at him, but as if she didn't notice him, she continued to grind her rouge. One was sitting on the other side of the rockery. One of them had her head down, her 10 slender fingers pinching a flower, incomparably indifferent. The system said if the little cannon fodder had a favorability notification, it would be around 10,000. He had never seen such an immature cannon fodder. They hadn't even held hands, and he had already turned into the ultimate bootlicker. Wei Wei Bai said, "It can't be helped. He can't do it. If he could, he would have pounced on me long ago." The system immediately panicked. He's been actively looking for medicine to treat himself recently. What if he suddenly fails? Buy some eunuch medicine to make him fail completely. Wei Wei Bai's face was calm. It doesn't matter whether he can or not. It'll be even better if he really pounces on me. If that wretch doesn't rebel, I'll pretend to swallow a cricket alive. To make tortoise, no. Male lead Lu rebel. Host, you're really worried sick. He was afraid that the color of the green hat was not deep enough. He really wanted to help the little emperor a little. The little emperor secretly looked at Wei Wei Bai for a while. Only then did he carefully walk out, pretending that he had just arrived. Wei Wei Bai looked up. Her eyes were indifferent, and there was no trace of smile. But to the little emperor, this expression was already very good. After all, in the beginning, when she entered the palace, she was almost ready to die. Now, he had the confidence to grind with her until they were old, and she didn't like it anymore. It was also for a lifetime. Chapter 28:52. Yuan Xian couldn't help but smile, a trace of happiness appearing in his eyes. All these years, he felt that this was the happiest time of his life. Wei Wei Bai looked at him indifferently for a while, then gently looked away. Her fingers were stained with some lipstick, and the light powder on her fingertips looked exceptionally beautiful. Yuan Xian had nothing to say, so he tried to find a topic to talk about. He stared at those women's things. It's very pretty. Wei Wei made it really well. Wei Wei Bai looked at him indifferently, then put the lipstick in a box. Her careful look made him feel uncomfortable. This made him a little uncomfortable. She rarely pretended to be herself in front of him, but she made so much rouge. The rouge was made for Lu Xinglan, right? Women would only dress up so happily in front of the person they liked. Women dressed up for the person they liked. He didn't have the right to make her dress up for him. Yuan Xian silently swallowed his bitterness and immediately revealed a smile. Wei Wei, let's go to the Imperial Garden before he could finish. A eunuch scrambled over and said in a panic, Your Majesty, it's chaotic, it's chaotic. All the ministers are asking to see you. Yuan Xian turned around, and the gloominess on his face reappeared. He suppressed his anger and said coldly, The lady is here. What are you shouting for? What if you disturb her? He didn't give Wei Wei Bai a position, because it wasn't that time yet. She was so repulsed by him now. If he gave her a position, he was afraid of forcing her to death. In the future, when she was willing, he would give her the most honorable thing a woman could have. This kind of wish was hidden in his heart. The young emperor didn't say it out loud, but everyone in the palace knew that they couldn't slight the lady in the emperor's chamber. Whoever dared to disrespect her would incur the wrath of the emperor. The eunuch's face immediately turned pale with fright, and he knelt down and trembled. Your Majesty, General Lu has rebelled. The border army has already taken 3 cities in a row, and no one can stop them. 3 cities in a row. Yuan Xian's face turned pale, and he immediately looked up at Wei Wei Bai. However, he saw that she had already raised her head, and a trace of shock appeared in her indifferent eyes. He pursed his lips and immediately kicked the eunuch away. Deceiving the public with your lies, scram. After saying that, he immediately said to Wei Wei Bai calmly, "It's just some rumors. Lu Xinglan is still missing. How could she rebel all of a sudden?" A trace of doubt appeared on Wei Wei Bai's face as she stared at him quietly. Seeing this, Yuan Xian felt a little guilty. However, she only turned her face to the side and nodded indifferently. Then, she continued to make the rouge. He seemed to believe him. Yuan Xian heaved a sigh of relief and said, "I'll go take a look and reprimand those old officials who only know how to deceive the public with lies. Remember to eat more for dinner. When I come back, we'll go to the roof and watch the moon." In front of Wei Wei Bai, he would always unconsciously forget to use such a distant form of address. Instead, he wanted to use me to close the distance between them. Wei Wei Bai didn't say anything. Instead, she slowly wiped her hands with a handkerchief. Yuan Xian turned around and left. When he stepped out of the door, however, he heard the girl behind him say softly, "Okay." Yuan Xian almost tripped over the threshold. As if in disbelief, he immediately turned around. "Okay, what does that mean?" "Watch the moon. It's better to eat more. No matter what, it's good." Yuan Xian's gloomy mood was immediately swept away by ecstasy. He couldn't suppress the joy in his heart and immediately smiled happily. "Wait for me to come back. I'll solve it soon." After saying that, Yuan Xian hurriedly ran away. Chapter 2853. When those old officials saw the young emperor coming, they thought he was going to lose his temper again. However, Yuan Xian was very calm. "Tell me the situation." Lu Xinglan's army had won one after another. Some local officials even surrendered directly. Many border generals were Lu Xinglan supporters. Lu Xinglan didn't need to put in much effort and directly knelt down to acknowledge her as their master. It was said that many traitorous officials were starting to wear dragon robes. Everyone knew that Lu Xinglan had rebelled. This country was probably going to change owners. The Lu family's reputation in the southern nation was too great, and the royal family owed the Lu family too much. As a result, the people heard that General Lu had rebelled. Instead of being shocked, they were happy. They all felt that the royal family deserved it and did a lot of bad things. Many people felt that if it weren't for Lu Xinglan, the southern nation would have been finished long ago. If Lu Xinglan was the emperor, not many people would object. This was also the bad karma of the royal family's absurd extravagance and corruption over the years, which had ruined the people's voices. The situation was not optimistic. Lu Xinglan was unstoppable. If she rushed all the way, she would be able to rush to the gates of the capital in less than half a month. Even if they closed the gates and guarded with the tall and strong city walls, they could only hold on for 2 months. Because in 2 months, the granary in the capital would be empty. At that time, even if they didn't surrender, the people would rebel. Not to mention, who knew how many of the court officials had rebellious thoughts in their hearts. They were all on Lu Xinglan's side. Yuan Xian was extremely calm as he listened to the officials' worried arguments. The youth who had always been irritable and ruthless seemed to have grown up overnight. They were about to start cursing at each other in the court. The absurd emperor who had always been a bystander finally waved his sleeve coldly and told these people to stop arguing. Then, he coldly began to plan a counterattack. It wasn't that the royal family didn't have an army, especially when Lu Xinglan's power was strong. How could they not be vigilant? All these years, Lu Xinglan had infiltrated the court. The royal family also wanted to infiltrate Lu Xinglan's camp, although most of them failed. However, they still obtained a lot of useful information. Yuan Xian knew how many of Lu Xinglan's people there were in the court, but he could drag all those who were confirmed out and kill them. This was his method. Normally, this was the behavior of tyrant. But now, he could intimidate the court and stabilize the situation. In troubled times, violent means were sometimes the only way to suppress a chaotic situation. Soon, a group of officials were killed outside the imperial court. All the quarrels in the imperial court stopped. None of them dared to speak. Only then did Yuan Xian leisurely begin to issue his orders, letting his trusted aides lead the imperial guard and the local army that he had been nurturing over the years. They gathered together to fight against Lu Xinglan. They had to stop Lu Xinglan from entering the capital. Yuan Xian thought about it calmly. As long as he delayed Lu Xinglan, it was not impossible for him to counterattack. Lu Xinglan's strategy was fast. The northern barbarians didn't even have time to react. Once he was able to hold Lu Xinglan back, he would be able to do so. Seeing this opportunity, the north immediately gathered its troops and attacked Lu Xinglan's rear. It would definitely cause Lu Xinglan great losses. The sinister young man coldly planned. He was too scheming, and all kinds of schemes could not be put on the table. In comparison, Lu Xinglan was more righteous. She was even righteous toward the people of the Southern Empire. But this justice could be used to bring down Lu Xinglan. Because the northern barbarians had attacked. Even if the people were plunged into misery and suffering, should Lu Xinglan save them? If he didn't, he wouldn't be able to hold his ground if he captured the capital. At https://www.sashu.com/ to read the full article at https://www.sashu.com to read the full article at https://m.sashu.com/ to make it easier for you to read it next time. You can click on Chapter 2854. If he saved her, he would be attacked from both sides. Yuan Xian smiled sinisterly. He was afraid of losing something. Anyway, with his personality, if he couldn't get it, he would just die together. It didn't matter how many people died in the Southern Kingdom. If he didn't have a good life, no one would have a good life. This was where he was ruthless. Lu Xinglan, that hypocrite, liked reputation, so he would be dragged down by reputation. He was happy to watch Lu Xinglan dance on the fire. After the government decrees were issued, some of the ministers saw Yuan Xian's potential. All these years, his brilliance had been suppressed by Lu Xinglan. If he wasn't so absurd and cruel, he would be a qualified gentleman. He was still capable. After all, he could shock the imperial court and come up with a plan to hold back Lu Xinglan's army. Who could say that such a person was not capable? After Yuan Xian suppressed the chaotic imperial court, he waved his sleeve and dismissed the court. The sky was dark. The head eunuch came over and said with concern, "Your Majesty, eat something to fill your stomach." Yuan Xian pushed him away and hurried out. He didn't care about others at all. He jogged all the way to the bedroom and saw that Wei Wei Bai had already finished eating. He looked at the palace maid. The palace maid immediately knelt down. "Miss, you ate half a bowl of porridge." Yuan Xian was overjoyed and immediately ordered the imperial kitchen to be rewarded. Wei Wei Bai didn't have any other reaction, as if it was none of her business that he was happy. Yuan Xian didn't care about this. He saw that she was softening bit by bit. He immediately said, "Let's go look at the moon." Wei Wei Bai looked at him indifferently and didn't say anything. Yuan Xian immediately had someone set up a ladder and climbed up to the roof of the bedroom. Wei Wei Bai sat beside him. His fingers had just touched her hand when he was pulling her up. The youth's face was red. The moon was very big and round. Yuan Xian touched his stomach and felt like he was looking at a sesame seed cake. After looking for a while, Yuan Xian thought of something and said, "Lu Xinglan has been found." Wei Wei Bai immediately looked up at him and asked softly, "Really?" Yuan Xian smiled bitterly. She only reacted to this topic. He pursed his lips before telling the truth. He's rebelling. He's ambitious. Seeing that she was unhappy, he frowned. Yuan Xian immediately stopped scolding Lu Xinglan. After all, she saw Lu Xinglan as her husband. She was definitely unhappy that he was the bully who had snatched her away and was scolding Lu Xinglan. Wei Wei Bai lowered her eyes and said worriedly, "Did he rebel?" Yuan Xian silently looked at her worried side profile. When the moonlight fell on her skin, it was like falling on the purest of petals. He suddenly thought of something and said, "I won't kill him." Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes fluttered in disbelief. Yuan Xian immediately said, "If you really don't kill him, Wouldn't his death take root in your heart? Lu Xinglan isn't a perfect person. This time, I fought a fair battle with him. If I win, I still let him live. If he wins, I will die. Speaking up to this point, the young man, who had always been thoughtful, had a face full of pure sadness. I've been living in Lu Xinglan's shadow since I was young. Everyone told me that without Lu Xinglan, there would be no Nangua, and there would be no me. Speaking up to this point, Yuan Xian coldly mocked himself. I'm a good-for-nothing. This is what everyone told me. I'm like a puppet sitting in the highest position, but I can't do anything. I'm happy that Lu Xinglan has rebelled. I can finally do something. Yuan Xian suddenly sighed and revealed a pure and happy smile. It's rare to see the moon with you. Why are you saying such disappointing things? Suddenly, he paused. The girl's finger gently fell to the corner of his eye. She looked at him with clear eyes. After a long time, she said, "Don't be sad. You're not a good-for-nothing." Yuan Xian was a little stunned. Suddenly, the corners of his eyes became wet. He quickly lowered his head and said sullenly, "No, everyone says that I'm a good-for-nothing." As he said, he quickly wiped the corners of his eyes. "And I'm very bad to you." Wei Weibai didn't say anything. She fell silent. Yuan Xian also knew that he was a disappointment. He immediately smiled happily. "The moon is so beautiful tonight." Wei Weibai glanced at him indifferently. Just when Yuan Xian thought that she wouldn't say anything as usual, she softly said, "Yes." When they went down the stairs, Yuan Xian was still dizzy. She responded to him. When they went down the stairs, Yuan Xian took the initiative to hold her hand. Naturally, she also let him hold her hand. The little emperor stared at her blankly for a long time. His face was red. The system was munching on the expensive brand of strawberry-flavored potato chips. It was really a little cannon fodder that didn't play out. It felt just like that, on Xian Wu's side. But he saw Lu Xinglan silently grinding the arrowhead. His expression became more and more sinister. The man's face hidden in the shadows was pale and cold. His lips were tight. It was like a sword that carried its own killing intent. It was extremely ruthless. "Madam, maybe your feet are just sore. Let Yuan Xian lean on you." Xian Wu thought about it, and could only comfort him like this. After all, in the message, Yuan Xian and Madam were admiring the moon together. Madam took the initiative to touch Yuan Xian and even touched his face. When they went down the stairs, she held Yuan Xian's hand. Holding hands was fine. When they walked, she might be tired. She even unconsciously leaned on Yuan Xian. The informants couldn't get too close. They couldn't hear anything, but they saw their movements. Intimacy. He didn't reject it. Lu Xinglan was silent. He just picked up the arrowhead and looked at it. He accidentally cut his fingertip with the sharp arrowhead. Blood seeped out. He looked at it expressionlessly for a while before putting his hand into his mouth. Chapter 2855. The battle was getting more and more intense, and the Lu family's army was steadily advancing. The imperial court was in a state of panic. Yuan Xian didn't care much. After he did everything he could, his mind had always been very calm. It was as if he knew that he might really be the last emperor of the generation. He was even more carefree. He hadn't been happy for so many years, and this period of time was the happiest. Even if the country was on the verge of collapse, he felt that it didn't matter. In just half a month, the palace people began to seek their own way of survival. On the contrary, the emperor's palace was still quiet and warm. The little emperor carefully made rouge for Wei Weibai. He smiled and said, "Wei Wei, do you think this is okay?" Wei Weibai held a clean little brush and sat sideways. Her pink fingertips pinched the brush and carefully swept the dried petal powder. Her eyes were indifferent as she glanced at him lightly. The little emperor smiled foolishly. His fingers were red from being pampered and pampered. He was a cruel and ruthless young emperor. In front of her, he was just a pitiful little boy who was carefully trying to please her. Wei Weibai looked down indifferently and didn't say anything. But she didn't stop him. Even when she was making the rouge powder, she would take the petal juice he made. The little emperor was stunned for a long time before he dared to secretly laugh. It was like a stolen beauty. In the past, his main goal was to defeat Lu Xinglan, a young man who blocked his way. Gradually, he calmed down. He was no longer shouting and killing. Every day, he went to the imperial court and gave orders on how to deal with the enemy. It was like work. Then, he would leave the imperial court and return to the palace. Although he used all his means, he only stopped a part of Lu Xinglan's reinforcements. It was rare for a genius to appear in 100 years. He could restore the weak state of the Southern Empire, and he could even trample on the weak and absurd royal family like stepping on ants. If it was in the past, the little emperor was very violent. He wanted to die together with Lu Xinglan. He had already used all kinds of tricks. Even many ministers were waiting for Yuan Xian to go crazy and drag them out to behead them for fun. But they didn't expect Yuan Xian would become a little white rabbit and deal with government affairs so obediently. Then, after he was done, he leisurely left the court to play. It was better to play some small games that didn't hurt people or cost money. Fight crickets, pick flowers, and so on. It was too cheap. The ministers looked back at the irritable Lu Jiejun. He thought about how Lu Xinglan had always been steady, but for some reason, it was as if someone was chasing after her. Not a single stable plan could be found. Every single time, it was a swift and violent plan. On the other hand, the little emperor was supposed to be irritable and reckless. However, she became obedient and didn't feel anxious at all. The ministers were a little confused. After the blush was done, Wei Wei mixed a beautiful light pink color. It's on the cheek. Her complexion had always been bad. Although her skin was exceptionally delicate and white, it was still pale. If the girl didn't have a little blush on her face, she would lack a delicate and charming feeling. Wei Wei reached out and dipped a little bit of the powder on her fingertips. After spreading it on her fingertips, she began to pat it on her face. The little emperor pulled the petals in his hand and put them into a small basket. He stared blankly as Wei Wei lowered her eyes and carefully applied powder on herself. The system was speechless. Did you eat this guy's brain? Wei Wei held her face. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. It's none of my business that he pounced on me. This green hat really squeezed over on his own accord. She really couldn't be bothered to look at him. He had already succeeded in his self-conquest. Fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here. Fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here. / fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here. Fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here. Fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here, comma. Chapter 28:56. Thinking about the target, it was like using a bunch of methods to increase the favorability. As for others, it seemed to be quite easy. Wei Wei also thought about this problem. She glanced at the little emperor, but she saw that the little emperor was also holding his face and looking at her with infatuation. Wei Wei was sure maybe the passerby cannon had a low IQ. But the system thought of a reason. The host had accumulated too much charm after so many planes. Except for the male lead who had not awakened, who was born with a divine hostility and a human love for her, which were entangled into a state that was difficult to conquer. As for the rest, who could get along with the host? If the host deliberately used her charm, it was easy to conquer others. This was the result of transmigrating to multiple planes. His soul had matured and become powerful, and he had the terrifying ability to charm others from all angles. It caused the host to become more and more beautiful, and stronger and stronger. So Wei Wei was already a mature host. The system thought comfortingly, and then took a bite of the diamond-studded golden cake. Delicious, especially when it thought of its million in debt turned into ashes overnight. Ha! It was even more delicious. Not only had the host matured, as a system, it had also matured and become stronger. Look at its life from eating chaff to eating gold, from being in debt to not having to worry about food. It was all earned by it. Life really did not lie. Live well, you never know what good luck is waiting for you. Wei Wei felt that the system was in a good mood recently, but she silently calculated the time. There was still a month, and the rebellion index was still 80. Lu Gui's son. The degree of favorability was not high, but the difficulty of the rebellion index was sky high. It seemed that the green hat was too shallow. It had to be a green hat. She silently looked at the licking little emperor, and then swept her gaze down below. This green did not live up to expectations. Even forced love did not have a strong taste. The little emperor saw Wei Wei by peeking at him. His face immediately turned red, and he immediately showed a silly smile. Wei Wei by looking so silly, she could not bear to do it. Just as Wei Wei by calmly tested the rouge color. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside the bedroom. Yuan Xian's foolish expression changed. He turned his head to look at the eunuchs and palace maids at the door. His eyes became terrifyingly ruthless. What's the commotion? Yuan Xian stood up and shouted coldly. When he was with Wei Wei Bai, he hated being disturbed the most. However, he saw a palace maid being kicked away. It was Yuanda, dressed in luxurious clothes, walking over fiercely. When she saw Yuan Xian, she bowed politely, but her tone was strange. Why? Can't I come to see my brother? Yuan Xian took 2 steps forward and sneered. Why are you looking at me? For no reason. Our relationship isn't that good. Yuanda, on the other hand, was laughing like a blooming flower, revealing a hint of insanity. She leaned forward and whispered, I know about your arrangements with Lu Xinglan. Do you want me to go out and announce it to the world? Yuan Xian looked at her coldly. He wasn't irritable or angry. However, the killing intent in his eyes had already emerged. Yuanda caressed her beautiful hairpin indifferently. She glanced sideways at Wei Wei Bai, who was sitting at the table. She was dressed in luxurious clothes with thick makeup. On the other hand, the young girl was wearing a simple light green dress. She had a flower in her hair, and there was a trace of light red on her fair face. She was so fresh and delicate that it moved people's hearts. Her charming eyes stared back at her without a single ripple in them. It was as if she was looking at a dead thing. Yuanda's nails dug deep into her palms. Her body was full of a rich fragrance, but it wasn't half as seductive as the young girl in front of her. Chapter 28:57. She smiled coldly. I know you have one less person who dares to die, brother. She said in a low voice that almost no one could hear except for Yuan Xian. Yuan Xian looked down at her, still cold. It was as if all his enthusiasm was for the girl behind him. No one could see the ripples in his eyes. Yuanda smiled unusually happily. I'll die for you, brother. Yuan Xian pursed his lips, his dark eyes carrying a hint of hostility. Yuanda took 2 steps forward and reached out to touch him. The little emperor wanted to avoid it, but he saw Yuanda's face full of tears. Maybe this is the last time I see you, brother. Brother, please hug Da. After saying that, Yuanda, who was full of fragrance, had already reached out to hug him. Yuan Xian's whole body stiffened, but he didn't avoid it. Yuanda hugged him for a while and suddenly sneered. She let go of Yuan Xian and finally glared at Wei Wei Bai. You foxy woman, you won't have a good ending. As she spoke, she ignored Yuan Xian's ugly expression and walked out with a smile. If I can't have it, no one can. Yuan Xian's body stiffened and stood for a while before he suddenly came back to his senses and said awkwardly, Ignore her. She's a lunatic. Wei Wei Bai looked at him calmly and then smiled like she was sighing. Don't blame her. She's also quite pitiful. Yuan Xian breathed a sigh of relief, but didn't mention that Yuanda just said that he had a way to deal with Lu Xinglan. Wei Wei Bai also didn't ask. The atmosphere between the two of them quieted down again. Suddenly, Yuan Xian's body began to heat up. His expression changed, but his mind began to be in a trance. Yuan Xian held on to his mind and moved his lips as if he wanted to call someone, but he only felt a burning fire in his throat. That kind of irrepressible impulse. It made his whole body tremble. He looked at the girl in front of him and saw that she seemed to have noticed something and looked over. The girl under the light. The corners of her charming eyes were slightly raised, and there was a peach blossom blush on her cheeks. This was the rouge she made. The name was March Peach Blossom. The name was nice. He was also good-looking. Yuan Xian's body felt like it was about to explode. The tip of his nose was filled with Yuanda's strange fragrance. He suddenly remembered that this strange fragrance was the least common type of aphrodisiac in the imperial family. The person who ate it would have an uncontrollable urge. The strangest thing was that not only would the person who ate it be affected, the incense would work as well, and even skin contact would work as well. Impossible to guard against. The only thing special about it was that its fragrance was exceptionally rich. One would feel dizzy after smelling it for a long time. Yuan Xian knew his body's condition. He couldn't get up at all. Even if they used drugs, they would only torture themselves without any effect. Therefore, it was impossible for Yuan to use this move to harm Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai seemed to see that something was wrong with him. She seemed to want to reach out and touch him. However, he suddenly thought of something and retracted his finger. Yuan Xian's eyes widened. Was she worried about him? He felt sad and happy at the same time. The eunuch sensed that something was wrong and immediately ran over. Your Majesty, what's wrong? How could Yuan Xian let anyone know what was wrong with him? There was a strange fragrance on his body. The eunuch would definitely know what it was when he smelled it. This kind of drug had to be vented. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to get out. But he didn't need to, because he couldn't. He just needed to get through this night. However, the eunuch and palace maid didn't know that if they found out that he had been poisoned with this kind of aphrodisiac, he would get through it without relief. Then, his secret wouldn't be able to be hidden. He was the emperor. Chapter 2858. If he was infertile, then forget about being the emperor. He might even lose his life. After all, when Lu Xinglan rebelled, he still occupied the rightful position. Once he didn't even have the qualifications to be the emperor, then he wouldn't even have the reputation of being the rightful emperor. In the southern kingdom, those who were infertile, they didn't have the qualifications to sit on the throne. Yuan Xian's expression was extremely ugly. He saw that the eunuchs had already smelled the strange fragrance in his breath. It seemed that even if they didn't realize what it was for a while, they would probably understand after thinking about it deeply. The best plan was not to kill them. That would only make things worse. Instead, he should find a woman and pretend to do good deeds. Who should he find? Yuan Xian's entire body was burning, and his head was covered in sweat. He finally looked at Wei Wei Bai. He pursed his lips, and there was a rare look of grievance in his eyes. She didn't love him. He wouldn't reveal the secret. Yuan Xian suddenly got up and took a few steps back. The head eunuch came over and was about to say something when he heard Yuan Xian say fiercely, get out of here." The palace maids and eunuchs were all chased away by Yuan Xian. After Yuan Xian kicked the last eunuch out, he shouted, "Close the door. Don't open it until tomorrow morning." He chased him away. The main door of the bedroom was forcefully pushed shut by the eunuch outside. Yuan Xian rushed over and locked the door. After completely locking the door, he panted and turned to look at Wei Wei Bai, who had stood up. She seemed to be a little puzzled. Her eyes were clear as she looked at him with slight worry. Yuan Xian originally wanted to rush over and tear her clothes. He might not be able to do anything. It was just a terrifying impulse. But he saw the worry in her eyes, even if it was so faint that it was almost invisible. Yuan Xian stumbled back a few steps and knocked into the tightly shut door. He sat down along the door. Then his whole body trembled and curled up. His whole body seemed to be on fire, but he didn't dare to raise his head. He was afraid that he would blaspheme her. He just didn't want to find another woman. Outside the door, the eunuch on watch walked past. It was late at night. The youth silently endured. Suddenly, a hand gently patted his shoulder. Yuan Xian trembled and immediately said, "Stay away from me. I will hurt you." However, that delicate hand did not leave. Instead, it rested on his shoulder and exerted a little force. He seemed to be comforting him. Yuan Xian raised his head in a daze, only to see the girl squatting, her skirt falling to the ground like a flower. She tilted her head and looked at him curiously. But she didn't ask him what was wrong. She just squatted with him. For some reason, Yuan Xian suddenly said softly, "I've been drugged. I want a woman." Wei Wei Bai looked at him indifferently for a while, then slowly moved back. This action rejected his request for a woman. In the end, before he could take a few steps back, Yuan Xian had already reached out and grabbed her skirt. "Don't be afraid. I can't do it." Wei Wei Bai paused and blinked slowly, as if she was thinking about the meaning of this sentence. Yuan Xian didn't say anything again. His fingers tugged at the hem of her skirt, and then he lowered his head. He felt inferior and guilty, and he didn't dare to look at her. After a long time, he heard the girl say indifferently, "I won't tell anyone." Yuan Xian's fingers trembled as tears rolled down his cheeks. The palace gate was cold, and thousands of lights were lit. The lonely young emperor suddenly knew what true warmth was. Lu Xinglan was sorting out the blueprints when he suddenly stared at the book on the table. He reached out and silently opened it. There were a few dried flowers in the book. They had fallen from her head. He put them in the book. The pages were stained with the color of the flowers, and the petals had also lost their bright luster. He looked at it for a while, and there was a hint of forbearance in his indifferent eyes. His fingers trembled, and the pages fell back to their original place. Xian Wu floated to the ground and brought over a wooden tube. Routine information was more important than military matters. It was about Wei Wei Bai's situation in the palace. Lu Xinglan held it in his hand, but he didn't open it for a while. Others couldn't understand this information, but he knew that she had softened. She no longer rejected that insidious emperor. She even began to rely on him. It was a very subtle change, but it made his heart feel as if it was stabbed by a sharp thorn. What was it this time? Was Yuan Xian making rouge with her again? Chapter 28:59. Lu Xinglan lowered her long eyelashes and pursed her thin lips into a tight line. She didn't want to open this message for a moment. Xian Wu was about to leave, but turned back. "That crazy Yuanda wants to see you." Lu Xinglan glanced sideways, unmoved. "How did she get here?" Xian Wu was silent for a moment before saying, "She said she's here to seek refuge with you and bring the secret of how Yuan Xian paralyzed our army." Lu Xinglan sneered. "I want her brother's empire. She'll tell me Yuan Xian's deployment. Even if she does, do you believe it?" Xian Wu was calm. "I believe it." Lu Xinglan, Xian Wu said, "She loves you and is crazy. The news she brings must be true." Lu Xinglan, hearing that the vicious princess loved him, Lu Xinglan didn't feel happy at all. Lu Xinglan didn't feel happy at all. Instead, she felt disgusted, as if a poisonous snake was crawling up her back. He walked out with the small wooden tube in his hand and a cold expression on his face. Yuanda was surrounded by a group of soldiers. She was dressed in luxurious clothes, with a golden hairpin and heavy makeup. When she saw Lu Xinglan walking over, her eyes lit up. She couldn't help but take 2 steps forward. Her body was almost touching the tip of the blade, but she still walked forward step by step, not afraid of death. She looked at Lu Xinglan with infatuation and fanaticism. "Xinglan, I haven't seen you in a long time. Come here and let me see you." Lu Xinglan stood far away but didn't say anything. The cold and beautiful man stood in the shadows. The light of the lantern was too hazy. When it fell into his eyes, it was like a layer of breathtaking, illusory fog. Yuanda didn't care about his coldness. She reached out and tidied her clothes. "I came in a hurry in the middle of the night and didn't change into my best clothes to see you. I just want to test Yuan Xian." I guessed his plan and when to act in front of him. He actually believed me. She loved Lu Xinglan. She loved him so much that she would rather snatch the entire empire from Yuan Xian and give it to him. Yuanda was happy. "I won't touch you. Give me a pen and paper, and I'll write his deployment for you." Lu Xinglan looked down expressionlessly. Fragments of light floated on his thick eyelashes. His voice was calm and emotionless. "I don't need a pen and paper. I don't need any of the information you bring." As for Yuan Xian's plan, he knew that too. Yuan Xian was still young after all. He was too arrogant and did not understand the complexity of human nature. Although he had some talent, it was not enough. How could such a huge scheme not be leaked? Yuan Xian didn't even know how many of the eunuchs in palace made around him were spies on his side. The happy expression on Yuanda's face disappeared. She thought that she was of some use to Lu Xinglan, so she was exceptionally happy. But she never thought that he wouldn't want anything that belonged to her. "Then why do you want to see me?" Yuanda asked curiously. Then, her eyes suddenly widened. "For Wei Wei Bai?" Lu Xinglan stood indifferently in the dark and looked at her indifferently. However, he did not refute. Yuanda chuckled, his laughter getting louder and louder. "What's so good about her?" Other than being a little better looking than me, what else does she have that makes you guys so reluctant to part with her? Lu Xinglan frowned slightly when she heard the words you guys. Yuanda roared like a shrew. She's with my imperial brother now. They're really happy in the palace now. I put down the incense. How come my imperial brother let her go? I reckon that bitch has long forgotten about you. So she gave in after some hesitation. Lu Xinglan's face turned pale. Her teeth bit into the meat in her mouth, bringing out a hint of blood. But there was no letter. Slash. Chapter 2860. He turned to leave and said coldly, "Throw her out." Yuanda shouted, "Lu Xinglan, forget about her. She likes my brother." Lu Xinglan was halfway there when he suddenly grabbed a bow and arrow from a soldier beside him. He held the bowstring with his fingertips and shot an arrow. Yuanda felt the arrow hit her hair, and the cold and terrifying force went through her hair. Her golden hairpins fell to the ground, and her long hair spread out like a crazy woman. She held her head in fear and looked up to see Lu Xinglan standing far away with the bow in his hand. His face was as gloomy as a demon. Yuanda was terrified and didn't dare to say anything. She turned and ran. Lu Xinglan wanted to kill her. That murderous intent was real. Lu Xinglan threw the bow and arrow away and walked into the house. As he walked, he crushed the wooden tube with one hand and took out the note to read. With just one look, he crushed the note. There is only one sentence in it. Yuan Xian has been poisoned by love. He and his wife are in the same room. The door is locked, and no one can peek inside. Wei Wei Bai sat while Yuan Xian was like a pitiful puppy. He lowered his head and tugged at her clothes. He shivered and endured. She silently accompanied him. Then, she heard a notification sound in her ear. Rebellion Index 90. The system said, the male lead received a delivery. No, he got a cuckold. Wei Wei Bai said, damn, he's really a cuckold. He didn't even reach 100. The system said, if the index isn't enough to sit on the throne, it's impossible to reach 100. 90 is calculated by combining the male lead's strength and thoughts. Wei Wei Bai said, don't think I know what this cuckold is thinking. He's not planning to sit on the throne. That's what he's thinking. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so hesitant. Lu Xinglan had been in the Southern Kingdom for so many years. He even felt that he had given up his military power and left. He could live well. The royal family and the Northern Kingdom would never be able to take revenge on him. His power was much greater than the royal family. If he really wanted to rebel and become the emperor, it wouldn't be this situation. He would have hung Yuan Xian long ago, then announced a reason for him to be promoted without bloodshed. There were countless people in the imperial court who belonged to Lu Xinglan. There was no need to mention the harem. Lu Xinglan would know immediately what she was doing every day. If not for tonight, everyone would have been chased out. She couldn't let Lu Xinglan believe that there was anything going on between her and Yuan Xian. After all, Yuan Xian had done something to her. As long as there were a few palace maids or eunuchs, any news would be spread. In the southern nation, Lu Xinglan had long been able to cover the sky with one hand. That bastard had been rebelling until now. He probably hadn't thought of becoming the emperor yet. Wei Wei Bai sighed. I've never seen such a patient in all the strategies I've tried. Even a tortoise shell has appeared. The moss on the tortoise shell has turned green, but he's still not moving. The system replied, don't worry. In the end of the rebellion, he will definitely become the emperor. Otherwise, how could there be such an allusion to the yellow robe? In the end, even if Lu Xinglan didn't want to be the empress, she would still be the empress. He had no choice but to do so, because the people around him would force Lu Xinglan to do so. Wei Wei Bai shook his head and said indifferently, he's still living too well. There are too few green hats. Young people still need to train. Lu Xinglan really didn't want to be the emperor in the end of the rebellion. Who could force him? He just didn't want to be the emperor. He wanted to conquer the country and let the person he approved of be the emperor. That was why the current situation happened. System. How else can he train? The male lead has turned into the Hulk. Do you still want to plant trees on his head? Slash. Chapter 2861. The night was cold and silent. After the most uncomfortable time, the little emperor got up and began to act. He threw the bedding on the ground. Wei Wei Bai rubbed her eyes sleepily and looked at him in confusion. The little emperor's face was a little red. It has to be a little messy before they believe us. Wei Wei Bai held her chin with her hand and looked indifferent. Oh, Yuan Xin coughed lightly and said awkwardly, I messed up the quilt a little. Wei Wei Bai nodded and looked at him indifferently. There was no shyness of the little emperor at all. What was there to be shy about? This small scene was too boring. The little emperor crumpled the quilt and thought about where he had left it. Wei Wei Bai said calmly, Clothes. Everywhere was a mess. Only the clothes were not messy. Who were you fooling? Yuan Xin immediately blushed. After hesitating for a while, he began to untie his robe and reveal his thin clothes. Although he was usually very cruel, because he was not good in this aspect, he was indeed a little unfamiliar with these. As a result, his movements were a little clumsy. Bai Weiwei yawned and didn't object. She tugged at her collar. She did not take off her clothes. She simply pulled open her collar. Only half of her collarbone was exposed. The little emperor hugged his robe and stood by the bed, looking at her with red eyes. She did not know if he was holding back or shy. At dawn, the door opened. The little emperor was lying under the quilt. His clothes were all over the floor. And Wei Wei Bai was calmly combing her hair with a comb. She looked like she had just woken up, but one could see the fatigue on her face. Her collar was not buttoned properly, revealing the white skin of her neck. And the little emperor had his back to everyone. She let him undress and sleep. Then she sat. This way, everyone would know that they were together, and no one would find out his secret. When the palace maids and eunuchs came in to take a look at this scene, they were speechless for a moment. They felt that the little emperor's body was not good. He had been squeezed dry by the demon. But the news that Yuan Xian favored Wei Wei Bai almost spread throughout the harem. It also spread throughout the previous dynasty. It was no secret that the emperor was not enthusiastic about the women in his harem. After such a long time, it was rare to see him interested in a woman. There was hope for future generations. Some were happy, while others were sad. After all, they were facing a national crisis. It was not a good sign that the emperor was still indulging in beauty. There were also people who felt that this was the time to leave behind an heir. If anything were to happen, the empire would fall into the hands of others, and these old officials who supported the imperial family would not be able to live in the future, no matter how chaotic the outside world was. The little emperor didn't allow anyone to tell Wei Wei Bai. In the harem, although Wei Wei Bai had no status, she was the true master of the harem. Even the emperor listened to her. Who dared to disrespect her? However, Wei Wei Bai didn't act like a real demoness who could cause the downfall of a nation. She didn't want to indulge in wine and meat. She liked to let people collect flower petals. Then, he would help her dry the petals or crush them to make rouge. After a long time, everyone felt that Master Bai was easy to get along with. Moreover, the little emperor's temperament had also become much more peaceful. Except for those concubines who gnashed their teeth to pieces, most of them had a good impression of Wei Wei Bai. These pieces of news arrived at the army camp one by one. Every day, Xian Wu felt that Lu Xinglan was becoming more and more gloomy and terrifying. This kind of gloominess was so heavy that his face was green. It was really terrifying. Lu Xinglan was expressionless. His slender fingers pinched the note. He lit a flame. The flame burned to his fingers, but he didn't look like he was in any pain. The note turned to ashes, staining his fingertips black. He suddenly asked softly, "Does she like him?" /fast full text / fast download fast comma. Chapter 2862. Xian Wu was silent for a while and said honestly, "I don't hate her, right?" The news wouldn't lie. He really didn't hate her. Moreover, he could live freely in the harem and still be indifferent to the little emperor. But everyone knew that after that night. Their relationship was different. The little emperor was wholeheartedly in love with her. Didn't he look like he had gotten what he wanted? Lu Xinglan looked at her fingers and suddenly smiled softly. She said that she would guard my grave. Xian Wu was expressionless. Even if she likes someone else, It won't hinder her from guarding your grave. His words were rough but reasonable. Lu Xinglan was speechless. The atmosphere was very heavy. Suddenly, Lu Xinglan sighed and said, "Forget it. Let Yuan Xian's death squad in." They already knew about Yuan Xian's plan. Yuan came here crazily and said that he wanted to expose Yuan Xian's plan. It was just a joke. Xian Wu nodded and felt that he should comfort him. If Madam likes someone else, just get her back. Don't feel bad. Lu Xinglan didn't say anything. She just looked down at the pieces of paper that had turned to ashes. After Xian Wu left, Lu Xinglan slowly got up and began to sharpen her sword. The sharp blade reflected the man's delicate features and was unusually gloomy. He suddenly chuckled. "Wei Wei, I still want to live in seclusion with you. I really want to." Wei Wei Bai was playing 5-in-a-row chess with a chess piece in her hand. A eunuch rushed in and said happily, "Your Majesty, great news. The rebel army has a plague, and many people have fallen." Yuan Xian immediately smiled when he heard this. Then he thought of something and immediately turned around, only to see Wei Wei Bai's chess piece fall on the chessboard and stare blankly at the eunuch. Yuan Xian's heart ached. He immediately got up and kicked the eunuch out. "What are you happy about? Who told you to come in and disturb my chess game? Get out, get out." After beating the eunuch away, Yuan Xian nervously tugged at the corner of his clothes and looked back at Wei Wei Bai. He seemed a little guilty. The pathogen of the plague had been prepared long ago. Those who brought the pathogen into Lu Xinglan's army had been chosen long ago. Yuan also brought the pathogen into Lu Xinglan's army. However, Yuan Xian did not believe her. He was afraid that she would betray him for Lu Xinglan. So he let Yuan be the attractive chess piece. Whether she betrayed him or not, there was still another team that spread the plague to Lu Xinglan's army. No matter how powerful the army, when they encountered the plague, they could only wait. This was Yuan Xian's plan from the beginning. He wanted to live and sit on the throne well. In the past, he didn't want power, but now he felt that power was tasteless. What he wanted was the right to stay by her side. An incompetent man had to keep a girl who didn't like him. The only thing that could be used was the position of great wealth and power. Bai Weiwei lowered her eyes and suddenly said in a cold voice, "To win, you use such a sinister method. You will kill everyone." Yuan Xian couldn't bear to see her so cold. The epidemic spread. Everyone had to die. Weiwei Bai's charming eyes were cold. Yuan Xian's momentum weakened. "I have a prescription to cure the plague. If I win, I will announce the prescription to save people. If he lost, let them all die. Even if it affected the people of the world, it didn't matter." Wei Wei Bai didn't ask. Yuan Xian didn't dare to continue. In the end, Wei Wei Bai just threw away the chess piece and said, "I'm tired." Yuan Xian pursed his lips. He didn't dare to say anything. He was a tyrant. He knew. But if he didn't do this, how could he win against Lu Xinglan? Because he was afraid that Wei Wei Bai would be angry when she was sleeping. He only dared to sleep not far from the door. He laid out a blanket. The little emperor fell asleep aggrievedly. Wei Wei Bai had her back to him. She was watching with the system. Wife, Fa hi, let go of my wife." Yes, the legend of the White Lady was so exciting and beautiful. Suddenly, the head eunuch said something carefully outside. It seemed that there was a fire in the palace. Yuan Xian's expression changed. He immediately got up and asked someone to guard the palace door. Then, he hurried out to take a look. Wei Wei Bai got up and got off the bed. She was putting on her outer robe. She only felt a warmth behind her as a man's embrace hugged her firmly. The man's fingers were holding her waist. He was so strong that it made her feel uncomfortable. She was about to scream, but she was already pressed back into the bed. The bed curtain fell. The faint shadow of the candlelight swayed. The man was on top of her. His eyes were as dark as the night. They were so cold that they were red. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened. She was just about to say, "Lu." He had already grabbed her hand and lowered his head to kiss her lips. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. The is at https://m/sashu.com// for the convenience of your next reading. You can click on the button below to record this reading record. Chapter 2863. Wei Wei Bai only felt that the man's aura was strong and scary, as if he wanted to squeeze her into his bones. His fingers pinched her wrist. The man's fingertips had a slightly cold aura. It was as fresh as the night dew when he came from outside. However, his skin was boiling hot, including his black eyes. They were as dark as the night, but they carried a scorching sharpness that didn't care about anything else. In the dark, her slender arms struggled weakly. The man maliciously propped himself up. His cold eyes were filled with a cold light. His hair was a little messy when she was struggling. His dark hair fell beside his handsome face, and there was a hint of evil beauty in his unkempt manner. Wei Wei. He looked at her shocked and panicked eyes. His thin lips curled up slightly, and he reached out to gently rub her moist lips. The girl's lips, which were originally not bright, were purposely rubbed into a bright red color by him. It was unusually delicate and delicious. His eyes curved, and he revealed a cold smile. "Did you miss me? It's been a while, but I missed you. I missed you a lot. I miss you a lot." It curled around his lips, giving off a dangerous sense of ambiguity for no reason. Bai Weiwei opened her mouth, and her eyes opened with a guilty conscience. The smile on Lu Xinglan's lips slowly disappeared. His voice softened. "Didn't you miss me?" These words were indescribably weak, and even carried a hint of helplessness. It was as if she didn't expect to face such a situation. Facing her guilty conscience, she didn't have a surprised expression. When he decided to go and protect the southern nation, he thought that he could successfully retreat and take her away when he came back again. He even thought that they would travel the mountains, cross the river, and experience the passage of time. In the end, he would be buried in her arms. This was a lifetime in his dream. He didn't expect that when he woke up at night, the news he received was that she had been snatched away. He never blamed her for losing her virginity to anyone. It wasn't her fault. If Yuan Xian was the one at fault, he would kill him. But he didn't prevent her from developing feelings for Yuan Xian. Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes trembled like the wings of a broken butterfly. Her pale face was devoid of blood. She said softly, "Let go of me. This is the Imperial Palace. It's dangerous for you to come in like this." Lu Xinglan looked at her silently. His fingertips slowly caressed the corners of her eyes, her lips, her chin, and finally her neck. It was as if he wanted to strangle her. He laughed coldly. "I'm not dangerous. I'll kill Yuan Xian later and take you away." When he said this, he looked up coldly. He looked around. It was a gorgeous and spacious bed, with a yellow bedding and a dragon-patterned pillow that represented imperial power. There was also the devastatingly beautiful young woman on the bed. He had always known that she was beautiful. She was so beautiful that no one could ignore her. Back then, she was wearing a simple dress and a simple bouquet of flowers. She was slender and elegant as she sat beside his desk, smiling at him innocently. She could already seduce people's hearts. Now, she was even more gorgeous. She was as charming as a stunner. It was as if she was born to lie on the emperor's throne. Every move of hers could tempt everyone to risk their lives for her. There was a trace of uncontrollable infatuation in Lu Xinglan's eyes. His fingers slowly tightened, as if he wanted to strangle her to death. "Did you miss me?" He repeated the same sentence, but it was much colder and more dangerous than before. It was as terrifying as an unsheathed sword that could cut people at any time. Wei Wei Bai looked at him with a pale face, but she did not say anything. She pursed her lips and frowned slightly. Finally, she sighed and said, "Don't kill him. This is the Imperial Palace. You can't escape even if you kill him." Quick transmigration system. Male God, come here. Chapter 2864. The remaining trace of anticipation in Lu Xinglan's eyes slowly disappeared. He was silent for a while before he sneered, "Why are you so afraid of him dying after sleeping with him?" Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened, but she did not refute. Instead, she repeated softly, "Let go of me, quickly leave." Lu Xinglan's fingertips slowly rubbed the skin on her neck. Under the delicate and fragile skin was her intense pulse. In the dark bed, there was no trace of gentleness on his cold face, but his actions were getting more and more excessive. It was a malicious and presumptuous action. It was more like punishment. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were misty, and she looked like she was about to cry. Her fragile charm was seductive. She begged softly, her voice so soft that it was pitiful. "Don't do it here." Lu Xinglan narrowed his eyes slightly. His actions were neither fast nor slow. She wanted to escape, but she could not move. Her voice was low, like a small animal on the verge of death. She sounded so aggrieved. "Lu Xinglan, let go of me." The man, with a cold and ruthless expression on his face, looked like he was punishing a criminal. His words were cold. "Do you like him? Do you like him? What's so good about him? He's just a little kid who can't even sit on the throne. His body, appearance, character, and ability are all inferior to mine. He even snatched you into the palace. You should hate him to death." Those news, each and every one of them, was digging at his heart. He watched as another little kid who was inferior to him in every aspect made her happy, made her soften, and made her start to give in to him, even to the extent of spending the night in the same room. She was his, wasn't she? How could she have a change of heart? Lu Xinglan gritted his teeth, unwilling to speak of the pain of his cowardice. Suddenly, he looked up and glared at the bed curtain with reddened eyes. The bed was covered, but he heard footsteps. It was Yuan Xian who was in a hurry. The footsteps outside the bed stopped, and Yuan Xian's gentle voice sounded. "Wei Wei, are you asleep? There's a fire in the palace, and it's still burning. It's not far from here. I'm afraid that this place will be affected. Why don't we go to the palace next door?" Lu Xinglan smiled coldly. In the palace next door, it was the Empress's. It had been vacant ever since Yuan Xian took over. The little brat was always cold and indifferent toward women. The harem fought to the death, but there was no one who could tempt Yuan Xian to be the empress. He hesitated to announce Wei Wei's status. So he was waiting here. The murderous intent in Lu Xinglan's heart boiled. Her cold eyes were incomparably dark, and her fingers unhurriedly touched the bed curtain. Just kill him. At this moment, Lu Xinglan could no longer suppress her impulses. This impulse came from hatred. Yuan Xian had done all sorts of absurd things to fight for power and for the sake of pleasure. He had cut off the army's food and fodder, causing him to almost die in the despairing battlefield at the border. He had never hated her, but now he hated it. How could he steal her away? Just as his fingers touched the bed curtain and were about to pull it open, a delicate hand grabbed his wrist forcefully. If he was so powerless, yet so determined. Lu Xinglan was stunned. The girl had already taken the initiative to come over. Her fingers pressed hard on his chest and pushed him to the side. For Lu Xinglan, this was not a strong enough force to shake him in the slightest. But when she was soft and helpless, the warmth was like the fragrance of love. The girl's eyes were like water, and her body was like a flower bud. Her every move was like a deadly weapon. It made him unable to move as she slowly pressed him onto the bed. // Chapter 2865. She sat on top of him, her black hair falling in front of her chest. The corners of the girl's eyes were slightly red, and her eyes were misty. Her light red lips were slightly pursed. She lowered her head, and her black hair fell on his body like satin. Her white neck was exposed under her messy clothes. It was so fragile and beautiful that it was frightening. Lu Xinglan's hand that touched the curtain trembled, as if she was about to open it. Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes trembled. She lowered her head almost without thinking and kissed his lips. She kissed him gently. She felt the man under her freeze. She left him and then looked up. Her expression was a little nervous, but her voice was very calm. Is the fire very serious? Yuan Xian felt that it was a little strange that the bed was so calm. He thought of Wei Wei Bai's usual carefree attitude. He felt that it was normal. She often ignored him. Yuan Xian felt a little guilty. It was not serious, but it needed time to put it out. The wind tonight would not let the fire spread to the bedroom, so there was no danger here. He just wanted to take the opportunity to let her see the Empress's palace next door. He had recently taken a lot of materials and silver from his private storage and renovated it. It was gorgeous and beautiful. He even planted a lot of flowers. She should like it. Lu Xinglan's side was almost ruined by the plague. Yuan Xian felt that he had victory in his hands, so he finally had the qualifications to let her be his empress. Although he had a lot of thoughts, Yuan Xian did not want to lie in the end. He could only say weakly, "It's not serious. It's going to be put out soon." Lu Xinglan was lying on the bed. The girl on top of him looked down calmly. Her lips were a little red and swollen, which was unusually attractive. She reached out her fingers unhurriedly and slowly ran them through her long hair in place of comb. Her charming eyebrows curved slightly, and her eyes were clear and moving. "If it's not serious, then I'll go to sleep first, okay?" The last two words were flirtatious, as if they were sentimental. It was so soft and numbing that it was ecstatic. Yuan Xian was stunned, and his face turned red. He stammered, "Okay, of course, I'll go take a look at the fire first and come back after it's put out." Although it was not serious, it was not put out yet. Yuan Xian was still worried. After all, he had toned down his absurdity a lot. Now that he had someone to worry about, he felt that he had to do everything well. He didn't want to upset her. A faint hum came from the bed. Yuan Xian obediently turned around and walked out step by step. And in the bed, Lu Xinglan's movement to get up was half stiff. He put his elbow on the bed and half propped himself up. Just now, when Yuan Xian was standing outside, he was about to get up and kill someone, but he couldn't move at all. His eyes were heavy, and there was almost no trace of emotion on his face, but it was not indifference. It was more like he was petrified. Wei Wei Bai gently turned her body, her fingertips casually landing on his chest. She lowered her eyes, and the clothes on her body had already fallen to the ground. Flirtatious and charming. She was like a fairy that had walked out of a gorgeous flower. She could let people die. He was willing to die. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 96. She gently pressed herself against him. Between breaths, the girl's voice was soft and sweet. "Xinglan, do you like this?" Lu Xinglan held her breath. The murderous aura was gone, and his mind was blank. Only his heartbeat was accelerating, and it was a complete mess. Wei Wei Bai's fingertips that were touching his heart moved, and then her expression was indifferent. "It seems that you like it. Otherwise, his heartbeat wouldn't be so fast." Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips and smiled, looking innocent and naive. Her voice was as soft as a sigh. "Is this bed comfortable?" Chapter 2866. Lu Xinglan's heavy eyes finally regained some clarity when he heard this sentence. His expression turned cold, but his breath was hot. Although he still couldn't control his body, she did make him completely calm down with one sentence. Bai Wei Wei, however, was neither fast nor slow. She lifted the clothes up. The dress was loose, and when she left his body, she reached out to push aside the bed curtains and tied them to one side. Under her neck, a large expanse of snowy skin was exposed. The curve of her shoulder blades was exquisite. She sat by the bed and turned her body slightly. Her eyes were full of seductive elegance. "Young master, I've never slept on such a comfortable bed before. I've never enjoyed such good food before. I've never ordered so many servants before." When she said this, she obviously liked the cheap words of wealth. But she was so calm that no one could feel that there was anything wrong. Her expression was gentle. "In the past, I only saw a small part of the world. I have never seen a richer world. Now that I have seen it, I feel that this kind of life is what I yearn for." Lu Xinglan propped himself up and reached out to calmly tidy his clothes. He pursed his lips and was expressionless, but his eyes were extremely cold. It was like a bottomless lake that could pull people into the drowning darkness at any time. Wei Wei Bai was not afraid. She turned around and smiled gently. Her charm was natural, and her beauty was unparalleled. She reached out and picked up a flower that was scattered on the bed. She liked flowers. There were flowers everywhere in this bedroom. A few fell on the bed. She picked them up and used them. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and sniffed the petals. Her gentle face was unusually delicate under the light. Her eyes were like feathers, lightly sweeping across his face. It made Lu Xinglan's body stiffen. She smiled even more beautifully. "I can get more, so why not? I can sleep in the highest place in the world, so why not?" Lu Xinglan looked at her silently, almost unable to refute. His strength was useless in front of her beauty at this moment. Wei Wei Bai put the hairpin beside her ear. Her hair was black, her skin was white, her eyes were watery, and her face was pink. She said sweetly, "So I don't care who is on the throne, young master." Lu Xinglan didn't say anything. The young girl asked again, "That's just how much I adore riches and honor. I used to love you, but wasn't it because of your status that I could live a good life?" Her gentle words were as sharp as the tip of a knife. However, he was left speechless. He couldn't even muster up the slightest thought of hurting her. Wei Wei Bai seemed to be tired as well. She yawned lazily and said, "Do you still want to stay the night? I remember that you were going to lose. The plague isn't easy to deal with." These words were sarcastic. She didn't seem to care about him at all. Lu Xinglan was silent for a moment, then suddenly laughed coldly. He grabbed her hand and pulled her into his embrace. Then, he lowered his head and kissed her fiercely. She shuddered and tears welled up in her eyes. Lu Xinglan paused for a moment, but didn't strike again. He released her, his deep eyes reflecting the girl's incomparably beautiful face. Finally, he chuckled. "Do you like this position that much?" After that, he let go of her and got off the bed expressionlessly. A few eunuchs came over and bowed their heads respectfully. Lu Xinglan looked at Wei Wei Bai's shocked expression and said calmly, "I'll wait for you to ask me for it." She wanted this position, because this position wouldn't belong to Yuan Xian anymore. When it belonged to him, wouldn't she have to ask for everything she wanted from him? Rebellion Index, 99. Remaining 1 point, waiting for the male lead to succeed in his rebellion and sit on the throne. The world of the favored one. If he really wanted to snatch a certain position, he would definitely get it. The prerequisite was that he wanted it. When Lu Xinglan left, he swaggered away, because the palace maids and eunuchs along the way were basically his people. Besides the head eunuch, who was a trusted aide of Yuan Xian, the rest of the people around him were more or less Lu Xinglan's people. Comparing people with people. Don't compare, there was no comparison. Wei Wei Bai supported her chin with her hand and said to the system, "Steady, the side quest is complete." 1 point was equal to 100 points. What Lu Xinglan lacked was never the power to rise to the top, but he didn't want to rise to the top at all. He wanted to force this old turtle to rebel and become the emperor. It simply used up all of her skills to make a cuckold. The system was silent for a moment, then said faintly, "That's a bit ruthless. It'll be hard to get more favorability in the future." There were still 4 points of favorability left. Don't look at the 4 points. If the host did that, she probably wouldn't get 4 points in her lifetime. Wei Wei Bai held her face with both hands. She had saved her face with great difficulty. How could she touch it? She smiled and said, "Am I beautiful?" System, this is a fatal question. He answered with difficulty, "Beautiful, right?" He could see that the soul was beautiful, but the body was blind. Wei Wei Bai spread her hands and said expressionlessly, "Then that's enough. I won't be disfigured. The favorability will be counted as P. I'm going to sleep. Wait for that turtle to become the emperor before starting work." The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 2867. Just as the system thought that the host was going to sleep, it heard the sound of the little emperor returning. A eunuch followed behind him, holding a food box. When he came back, he saw Wei Wei Bai lying on her side, but the bed curtain was open. Yuan Xian was stunned for a moment by her soft back and her black hair winding on the pillow. Then he blushed and immediately took the food box from the eunuch's hand, saying to the eunuch in a low voice, "Get out." Soon, only Yuan Xian and Wei Wei Bai were left in the bedroom. Yuan Xian was a little hesitant, but he still put the food box on the table. He called out in a low voice, "Wei Wei." He thought that she wouldn't respond, so he didn't ask her to sleep. However, the girl on the bed didn't seem to be asleep. She was silent for a while, then turned around and sat up gently. The beautiful girl was covered with a quilt. Although her clothes were a little messy, she was still dressed properly. After she came here, other than her outer robe, she was wearing the rest of her clothes. She wouldn't take them off to sleep. Yuan Xian knew that she was on guard. He wouldn't force her. Anyway, he had a lot of time to wait. He was young, and she was young. If he kept being good to her, she would definitely like him. Yuan Xian wasn't in a hurry. When he saw her get up, he revealed a happy smile. Wei Wei, the fire has been put out. Some candles in the palace fell to the ground, which caused the fire. Wei Wei Bai reached out and smoothed her long hair, not saying anything. Yuan Xian was in high spirits. Because it's too late, I asked the Imperial Kitchen to make some millet porridge for the stomach. I thought that if you haven't slept yet, you should eat some. He was actually just hoping for a fluke. If she hadn't fallen asleep yet, even if he could just eat with her and spend more time with her, Yuan Xian said as he filled the bowl with porridge. However, he heard Wei Wei Bai suddenly say softly, "The prescription for the plague." Yuan Xian's action of filling the porridge paused. He looked up blankly, not daring to say anything. Wei Wei Bai sat by the bed. The light blurred her appearance, her eyes as clear as water. "Can I have it?" Yuan Xian's eyes started to turn red as tears welled up in his eyes. "Are you going to give it to Lu Xinglan?" The plague spread within Lu Xinglan's army. Give her the prescription, and she will save him. It was to save Lu Xinglan. Yuan Xian was not angry. He could not be angry with her. He was just sad. He hadn't been so sad in a long time. "If I save him, I will die, Wei Wei." These words were from the bottom of his heart. He and Lu Xinglan's forces were not on the same level. The only reason he was able to last until now and not lose was because he was a little too vicious and had used all kinds of underhanded methods. Lu Xinglan, on the other hand, had openly pushed her way through. Whether it was reputation or strength, everything was good. Lu Xinglan was a good person. But why? Lu Xinglan had taken away his family's empire. He had nothing, but he had to bear all the infamy. And if he lost this position, he would lose her even more. Yuan Xian had a lot to say, but when he saw Wei Wei Bai's worried eyes, he could not say anything. He wiped his tears with his sleeve and said with a smile, "Wei Wei, let's eat porridge. The night is long. You must be hungry." Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, "I will always be with you." Halfway through the sentence, she frowned and shut up. Yuan Xian stopped wiping his tears and looked up at her in a daze. The young girl sat by the bed and was also looking at him. Her face, without makeup, had a trace of weakness. She seemed to have finally mustered up her courage and said, "Even if you lose, I will be with you. Is that okay?" Chapter 2868. Give her the prescription. She gave it to him. Even if he lost the country, she would accompany him. At this moment, Yuan Xian thought of the weight of the country. He had wanted this position since he was young and had real strength. This was his wish. Wei Wei Bai lowered her eyes and sighed softly. "If you don't want to pretend that I didn't say anything," Yuan Xian suddenly almost stepped forward. He was so excited that his fingers were trembling. "I'll give you the prescription. I'll let Lu Xinglan win." He suddenly said this. Wei Wei Bai turned to look at him and remained silent. However, she saw Yuan Xian say word by word, "I'll give the country to Lu Xinglan. You have to accompany me." The girl paused and raised her hand to gently touch his slightly red face. Her soft fingertips were as beautiful as a butterfly falling in love with a flower. She replied softly, "Okay." Inside Lu Xinglan's army, the plague was prevalent, and there were fallen soldiers everywhere. But Lu Xinglan and all the generals didn't feel anxious. It was more like a show. This show attracted all of Yuan Xian's troops. Soon, they would enter the trap set up by Lu Xinglan. After this battle, Lu Xinglan would be able to step into the capital. No one could stop him. If it wasn't for the fact that the capital would lose all its garrison troops, he would directly attack the city. He would use real force to step into the capital. Lu Xinglan actually didn't need to set up so many things. But too many people would die if he used too rough a method. It was always good to have fewer deaths. Lu Xinglan thought about the position that woman wanted. He had already thought about his hard work for the next few decades. Because it wasn't easy to be a good emperor. Too many people had died, and he had to clean up the scene after he took the throne. If what she wanted wasn't that extravagant wealth, it wouldn't matter if he was a little rough now. Because it was a mess, someone else would be the one cleaning up. Lu Xinglan placed the sharpened, long sword on the table. The quiver was full of arrows. The longbow was also replaced with a better string. Everything was like the last time he was going to the border to face the Northern Army. The only thing that changed. The person beside him was gone. Lu Xinglan sat in front of the desk and looked at the papers on the table. Not maps, but portraits of her. They were all drawn by the intertwining of hatred and love when he dreamed about her in the middle of the night. Every picture, whether it was drawn when he hated or loved, they were all beautiful. She was beautiful, but she was better than beautiful. Lu Xinglan stretched out her hand and put it away expressionlessly. In the painting, she had a sweet smile, and when she looked back, her face was full of beauty. When his fingertips touched the paper that had no temperature at all, Lu Xinglan suddenly came to a realization. He heard her say that she wanted that position, not when she fell in love with Yuan Xian. But in his heart, there was no hatred. It was a sense of relief. She loved dead things and riches. It was better than loving someone. He actually didn't have the slightest bit of disgust for her vanity. He even felt that he could give her whatever she wanted. Lu Xinglan was stunned for a long time before she smiled in relief. It was fine as long as he didn't like others. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 97. When Xin Wu came in, he saw Lu Xinglan smiling foolishly. He had a cat disease. One moment he wanted to kill someone, the next moment he was filled with grief and indignation, the next moment he gave up on himself, and the next moment he talked to himself. Now that he had leveled up, he knew how to smile foolishly. Of course, as a professional facial paralysis, a professional confidant, he wouldn't show the slightest bit of disdain. Xin Wu threw something on the table, as if he was afraid of being stained with a silly disease. Here, someone sent it to you. Lu Xinglan paused in the middle of putting away the drawing paper and was about to ask who it was. Xin Wu, Madam sent it. Download the mobile article at https://m. Sashu. Comma. Chapter 2869. Lu Xinglan loosened the paper in her fingers and picked up the bag. Xin Wu said, "It was sent by our eunuch in the palace. He said that Madame gave it to him personally and asked him to send it to you." At this point, he paused. Then he said, "By the way, Madame also added a sentence. She said that this is the last gift for you and that you have nothing to do with each other in the future." Lu Xinglan was quick to react when she heard this. She had already opened the bag. A sachet was revealed. It was embroidered by her. It was a twisted flower. He stared at it silently. The sachet seemed to be filled with her favorite flowers. Lu Xinglan picked it up and looked at it expressionlessly. The sachet was embroidered with a pattern that she was familiar with. She had embroidered many small things for it. Her embroidery skills had never improved. But in his eyes, it was still beautiful. Lu Xinglan put the sachet into her sleeve pocket. Her sleeve was filled with the fragrance of flowers. Then he continued to clean up the table. It didn't matter. Anyway, when he sat in that position, she still had to embroider things for him. The last gift was impossible. The first thing he would do when he got the position was to punish her by embroidering things for him. If she didn't embroider 100 pieces, she couldn't get out of bed. Lu Xinglan pursed her thin lips tightly. Her eyes were a little red. She refused to admit that she was hurt. Xin Wu was about to leave when he heard Lu Xinglan's cold voice. "Gather the generals and deal with Yuan Xian's guards." The time they had the plague, and the people who had fallen were enough for Yuan Xian's people to think. They had been defeated by the disease. Lu Xinglan smiled coldly. It's time to let Yuan Xian know what it means to be naive. How could a war to seize the country be won with schemes? In the face of absolute power, all methods were useless. As for the plague, there had never been a plague. The pathogen of the plague had been eliminated. The plague in their army was caused by drinking another medicine that caused rashes but didn't harm the body. Xin Wu nodded and then gathered the people. When the news of the guards collapsing and being killed and captured came, Yuan Xian was making way by rouge powder. The news didn't just bring news about the guards. He also brought good news about Lu Xinglan's army. This miracle had been deliberately embellished, and turned into Lu Xinglan being protected by the heavens. Even God felt that it was right for Lu Xinglan to be the emperor, and the imperial family represented by Yuan Xian became synonymous with brutality. The people of the southern nation needed Lu Xinglan, not the rotten royal family. Not only did the royal family lose the last of their guards, they also lost the hearts of the people. Several ministers knelt and cried outside the palace gates. Even the old feudal officials did not know how to be flexible. He was trying to get Yuan Xian to pull himself together and fight to the death with that traitor Lu. Most of the civil and military officials in the imperial court had already left. They had all gone to seek refuge with Lu Xinglan. Most of them were Lu Xinglan's people. On the contrary, the more useful palace maids and eunuchs in the harem did not run away. The harem was still. In fact, the portion prepared for the emperor's bedroom was even better and more exquisite. Yuan Xian couldn't be bothered to think whether it was a gift from Lu Xinglan or those palace servants who were extremely loyal to the imperial family. Now, he felt that making rouge was more fun. Lu Xinglan had led an army all the way here. There was no need to count. Yuan Xian also knew that Lu Xinglan would be able to enter the capital in a few days. He didn't panic. Instead, he made the rouge powder and poured it into a small box. Chapter 2870. Then he looked at the girl who was drinking bird's nest porridge beside him. She lowered her head and drank slowly. Her movements were unusually leisurely. Yuan Xian couldn't help but say, "He's here." Wei Wei Bai paused, but smiled sweetly. "Are you afraid?" Yuan Xian was stunned for a while. Ever since he gave her the prescription, she treated him much better. Her smile was a sincere one. Yuan Xian's heart was warm. He immediately shook his head and smiled happily. "I'm not afraid. I won't shoot. You're here." In the last days, she was with him. What was he afraid of? Lu Xinglan was the one who should be afraid. If he wanted that cold and broken country, he could take it. He didn't want it anymore. Anyway, sitting in that position was very lonely and unhappy. He might as well accompany the girl he liked to make rouge. He could now distinguish the use of many kinds of flowers. He could make many kinds of rouge. Wei Wei Bai finished drinking the porridge, but she heard the sound of dripping outside the window. Slightly cold water vapor entered. White gauze fluttered. It was a rainstorm. The rain was unusually plentiful, and it fell for a few days. Yuan Xian didn't need to go to court anymore because there was no one in the court. There was no one guarding the capital. The old eunuch looked older. His fingers were trembling as he wiped the table with a cloth. It wasn't that no one was working. It was that there were no people for Yuan Xian. The old eunuch wasn't stupid. He couldn't see it usually. If he still couldn't see that the eunuchs and palace maids in the harem were not Lu Xinglan's people, he would have lived in vain for so many years. Even the most dignified minister had left. How could this group of rootless things have the loyalty to face death unflinchingly? But it was because they knew that even if the master of the harem changed, she was still their master. So the old eunuch didn't dare to order others around and did everything himself. He was afraid that someone would poison his little emperor. The little emperor was happy. She was completely heartless. He took out the rouge he made and said tentatively, "Wei Wei, I'll help you dress." Wei Wei Bai was looking at herself in the mirror. She didn't refuse and just nodded indifferently. The little emperor was overjoyed. He didn't know how to draw eyebrows and was afraid that he would ruin it, so he didn't dare to do it. He only dared to dip his fingertips in the powder and gently wipe it across her cheeks. Her pale complexion had many peach blossoms on it, making her look even more beautiful. The grand eunuch came over and said softly, "Traitor Lu has already led the army into the capital." Yuan Xian smiled and didn't mind. "Oh, he's not my guest. Let him come." Now that things had come to this, he could be considered to have nothing to do and was just waiting for death. After applying the rouge for her, the little emperor laughed softly and said, "Wei Wei, you are so beautiful." Wei Wei Bai immediately revealed a sincere smile. "Yes, you have good taste." Yuan Xian hesitated for a moment before he finally touched her hand gently and lowered his voice. "When Lu Xinglan arrives, you should go and welcome her. If you give him the prescription, he will remember your kindness. And you're so nice. He will still love you." Yuan Xian was afraid that she didn't understand and said, "In the Imperial Academy of Medicine, there is my medical record hidden in the innermost compartment. He will know that I can't do it when he sees it. He hates women, but he doesn't hate you. Now that he is angry that you betrayed him, you should let him know that you're just enduring humiliation by my side and being coerced by me." And after seeing his medical record that he couldn't do it, she was still innocent. Lu Xinglan wouldn't hate her anymore. Yuan Xian smiled. If he is still angry, you should lower yourself and coax him more. No man in this world can escape your smile. Wei Weibai looked at him silently and was extremely calm. Yuan Xian was afraid that if he didn't say it now, he wouldn't have the chance to say it. "I also want to take you with me, but when you said that you were willing to accompany me, I couldn't bear to." So he let her return to Lu Xinglan's side. Live a better life. She didn't want to die here with him. Yuan Xian never thought that his heart actually had such a kind and soft side. Loving someone was not lowly. It was hope. He hoped that she could be better, a little better. Wei Weibai lowered her eyes and stared at him. Finally, she sighed lightly. "You are quite good." Boys who praised her beauty were all good children. Yuan Xian immediately smiled, feeling that everything was worth it. She said that he was good. When the army entered through the city gate, Lu Xinglan's eyes were deep. He took out his sachet, and a few drops of rain splashed on it. He frowned and immediately reached out to touch it. However, he felt a strange feeling, as if there was something hidden in the sachet. Lu Xinglan was stunned. His fingertips moved, and the sachet was opened. The flowers were already dry, and lying in the flowers was a piece of paper. He took it out and found that it was a prescription. He felt that it was a little familiar. He saw Xian Wu beside him and casually read the prescription. Xian Wu said calmly, "Yuan Xian's prescription to cure the plague after he spread it." They had collected information about this plague long ago, and they also found the prescription just in case. However, Xian Wu had seen this before. Lu Xinglan didn't look at it carefully. After saying that, Xian Wu found Lu Xinglan's expression strange. A prescription to cure the plague? The heavy rain hit the temporarily set-up canopy, and the atmosphere was a little quiet. Suddenly, Lu Xinglan stuffed the prescription and the sachet back into her clothes and rode the horse into the rain. So she stayed by Yuan Xian's side just to save him with his prescription? Lu Xinglan only felt that the rain was cold and piercing. His empty and cold heart began to warm up. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 98. Chapter 2871. Wei Weibai wore a pomegranate red dress, and large colorful peonies bloomed on the hem of her skirt. There was a trace of rouge at the corners of her eyes, and a red flower was drawn between her eyebrows. Her lips were covered in lipstick, and they were bright red and gentle. The rouge she made was scattered on the dressing table. The red lipstick was exceptionally bright. She used a small piece in a box and casually put it aside. Yuan Xian carefully chose flowers for her. In the end, he chose a red Chinese rose and pressed her hair down. Wei Weibai smiled gently at him. "I'll ask him to let you go out of the palace and be a rich and idle young master, okay?" The little emperor stared at her blankly. Her eyes were clean and clear. When she smiled, the charm at the corners of her eyes and the purity in them made one intoxicated. Yuan Xian's face turned pale. "Lu Xinglan won't let me go," and he was halfway through his sentence. He pursed his lips and didn't continue. Was he going to live and watch her be taken away? That feeling was better than death. She said she wanted to accompany him. It was just a beautiful promise. She was willing, but Lu Xinglan wasn't. At that time, he already had no power. How could he compete with Lu Xinglan? But in vain, it made her feel that she was in a difficult position and made her life difficult. He was selfish and cruel all his life. Even when he was about to die, he still wanted to live a good life alone. It would be good if he could live a better life. She had lived a rich life before. He could even die. The little emperor's eyes were filled with unconditional infatuation. Suddenly, the sound of swords clashing sounded outside the palace. The palace gates opened, and the sound of horse hooves sounded so crisp. Even the heavy rain couldn't drown out this sound. Yuan Xian smiled helplessly. Lu Xinglan's horse. Every time he enters the palace, he's so arrogant. I'm used to hearing this. He had lived in Lu Xinglan's shadow since he was young. He could never get what he wanted. If he was talking about hatred, he hated Lu Xinglan the most. He was arrogant and aloof. He said he was helping him guard the Southern Empire, but he didn't put him in his eyes at all. Such an official was nothing more than a knife hanging around his neck. Look, didn't he rebel? He won easily. How nice. He didn't have to worry about Lu Xinglan rebelling anymore, because this position was no longer his. Yuan Xian stood up, tidied up his clothes, and was about to walk out. But he saw the old eunuch rolling and crawling in. He trembled and hugged the little emperor's thigh. Your Majesty, the thief came in. Yuan Xian was taken aback, but he was not afraid. He only revealed a trace of a smile. He looked at the open door of the sleeping chamber. A slender figure slowly walked in with a long sword in hand. The smell of blood wafted through the air. Wei Wei Bai also looked over. Against the light, the man's black hair was tied up, and he was dressed in a blood-stained military uniform. There were still bloodstains on the tip of his sword that had not been wiped clean. They were wet from the rain, and drops of pink water dripped onto the ground. He was like the Grim Reaper who had just walked out of hell. Lu Xinglan raised her beautiful and cold eyes. Her gaze landed on Yuan Xian. He reached out and wiped his sword as if nothing had happened. Then, he searched the interior of the palace. Not far behind Yuan Xian, a white veil fluttered in the wind. The young girl happened to turn her head and look at him. She was dressed exceptionally well. She wore a gorgeous palace dress. Her eyebrows were bright, and her eyelashes were drooping like the wings of a broken butterfly. All of them were exquisite. All of them were good-looking. Lu Xinglan's hand that was holding the sword loosened. His voice became hoarse. Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai's gaze landed on the man's face. He actually looked a little haggard. No matter how powerful one was, they had to conquer this country. It was not an easy thing to do. Chapter 2872. His black hair was a little messy, and a few strands fell on his cheeks. His eyes were bloodshot from exhaustion. She lowered her head and gently raised her hand to touch the rose in her hair. People were much more beautiful than flowers. Lu Xinglan held her sword and looked at him coldly for a long time. Suddenly, she took a few steps forward. The little emperor saw that his mood was not right and blocked in front of him with a cold face. Lu Xinglan looked down at him. Her black eyes were cold. She silently raised her foot and kicked Yuan Xian down. Yuan Xian fell heavily to the ground. He only felt a sharp pain in his chest and abdomen. His blood was used up, and his mouth was bitter. Lu Xinglan expressionlessly stepped on his abdomen and crushed it. Her long sword was already on his neck. Do you still remember the first time we met? Lu Xinglan's tone was indifferent, as if she was making small talk. Yuan Xian coughed a few times and spat out a mouthful of blood. Before he could say anything, Lu Xinglan said calmly, At that time, I was still young. You were even younger than me. I entered the palace and was tortured. Those nannies and palace maids pricked my fingernails with needles. It was painful, but did not leave any traces. And you watched from the side and even laughed and clapped. The Lu family had been loyal for generations. They guarded the people and the country. How prestigious was their prestige! But because they all died in battle, leaving him as an orphan and a vain widow. Outside, he still had the old subordinates of the Lu family to protect him. After entering the palace and being tortured, as long as no big traces were left, no one would know. Lu Xinglan still remembered that when she was being tortured, she once heard a eunuch laugh and say, Many children die young. The wound is not big, but it increases the chances of getting sick. After a few more times, a cold will pass away. No one would know, and no evidence was left behind. In the inner court of the palace, those nannies, palace maids, and eunuchs who were neither men nor women, they left an unusually disgusting impression on him. He even began to feel that every woman gave off a foul smell. Eunuchs smelled even worse. Lu Xinglan's expression was indifferent. Her sword pierced his neck a little. When I was in pain, you laughed too happily. I was very unhappy. I felt that you were really annoying. In the vicious palace, vicious and rotten flowers were raised. There were also cruel and ruthless children. Yuan Xian was one, and so was Yuan De. But Lu Xinglan didn't hate them. The Lu family existed to protect the southern nation and protect the imperial family. Everyone in the Lu family was the biggest supporter of this country. It was a loyal dog. Even if Lu Xinglan was less loyal, she didn't want to be a dog. However, he had no interest in seizing this position. Yuan Xian also laughed bitterly. I also think that you're annoying, extremely annoying. Who would like to live in the shadow of another person every day, living in fear every day, and feeling the taste of a dagger hidden under the pillow? Who could understand? Lu Xinglan looked at him coldly for a while, then suddenly smiled. You forced me to be where I am today. Yuan Xian shouted. It was clearly you who had evil intentions and wanted to usurp the throne. The indifference in Lu Xinglan's eyes finally materialized. His voice was low and cold. No, you stole my woman. The Lu family had guarded this lousy country for a long time and was tired of it. Who cares? Yuan Xian was stunned for a moment and felt a chill on his neck. The long sword was about to cut his neck. Lu Xinglan was suddenly stunned. A pair of hands gently hugged his waist. He didn't know when the girl was standing behind him, but her soft body was pressed against his back. The armor was cold, but she was not afraid. Lu Xinglan's fingers trembled, and the long sword cut the little emperor's skin. Blood immediately gushed out. Slash! Chapter 2873. Yuan Xian didn't say anything, only looking at him with a mocking expression. It was as if he was urging Lu Xinglan to take him to kill him. But Lu Xinglan's sword didn't go down a bit. The girl on his back gently stroked the armor in front of his chest. Her voice was low and soft, like water flowing into his ears. Young master, kill me. These words were said with unusual calmness, as if life and death were just picking a flower and removing a hairpin. Lu Xinglan stared coldly at Yuan Xian for a long time. The girl behind him also quietly hugged his waist with her fingers. Her voice was lazy. He's good to me. Don't kill him. It's all my fault. Lu Xinglan's dark eyes narrowed. He said coldly, Is he as good to you as I am? Wei Wei Bai lowered her eyes and didn't answer. She seemed to be hesitating about something. The two men suddenly froze. It was as if they were waiting for a trial. The girl just quietly leaned against Lu Xinglan's back, full of the fragrance of flowers. Finally, her voice sounded unusually soft, like she was sighing. Let go of him. Kill him. You won't have a legitimate reason to take the throne. You still need him to write an edict for you to abdicate. Although everyone knew that Lu Xinglan was rebelling, the people also looked forward to the fall of the royal family. Let Lu Xinglan take over. But if there was a set of abdication procedures, at least if Lu Xinglan made a wrong decision when he took the throne in the future, he wouldn't be blamed for seizing the throne and rebelling, especially in a place like the Southern Kingdom. What was more needed was such a hypocritical and righteous procedure. The girl's words were soft, and she had thought everything through. He can't die, and you can't take me out like this. You can use the propaganda of the Tian Fa royal family to tell the world that you rebelled because you had no choice and not because of me. A trace of ruthlessness appeared in Lu Xinglan's ink-black eyes. His cold voice finally became intense. I did it for you. He used this country as a stepping stone. Instead, he tiptoed just so that he could reach her. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while, but she suddenly let go of his waist. Then, she took a few steps back and gently leaned to the side. She took out a handkerchief from her sleeve, stood on tiptoe, and reached out to wipe the blood and rainwater off his face. Lu Xinglan was taken aback, but he didn't dodge. The young girl's handkerchief smelled exceptionally good. It was filled with the scent of fresh flowers. She loves flowers. He knew. Lu Xinglan's fingers trembled. She hesitated to cut Yuan Xian's neck with her sword. He didn't care about his reputation. He didn't care about being scolded for causing chaos in the world just because of a woman. He even rebelled and seized the throne. The corners of Lu Xinglan's eyes were a little red, and the blood vessels in her eyes were even more obvious. He even felt wronged, although he tried his best to suppress this cowardly emotion. But when he saw her gently wiping his face, he couldn't help but feel aggrieved. Yuan Xian, that brat is not a good person. Why do you like him? Wei Wei Bai's expression was gentle. After carefully wiping his face, she bent down and gently placed her fingers on the back of his hand. His fingers were unusually nervous because he was too hesitant. Instead, he used too much strength. The back of his hand was the long sword that had killed countless people. But the young girl didn't seem to see it at all. It was like the bloodstains on the sword that couldn't be washed away by the rain. She gently lowered her eyes and carefully wiped the bloodstains on the back of his hand with the handkerchief. She was still like that little maid in his residence. She guarded him with the most gentle attitude, adored him, and worshipped him. Lu Xinglan pursed his lips. His nose was a little sour. His voice trembled. You betrayed me and still came over like this. Do you want to die so much? //. Chapter 2874. If he didn't find out about the sachet, if he really entered the palace and faced the furious him. She was so protective of Yuan Xian. Wasn't she afraid that he would hurt her? Wei Wei Bai lowered her head. Her eyes were clear and sweet. She saw a wound on the back of his hand. After wiping it with a handkerchief, she gently blew on it. Young master, you won't. You are my hero. How could you hurt a weak girl? After saying this, she looked up and smiled sweetly. And you saved me before. When we were young, if you didn't stop the northern army at the border, we would have been killed by the northern barbarians. Saying this, her smile was still sweet. So even if young master kills me, this unchaste woman, I am willing. There was no fear of death in her eyes. There was only a pure smile. Very naive. Lu Xinglan looked at her lowered eyes. She pursed her lips and sighed lightly. She said lightly, let go of your finger. Young master, I'll bandage it for you. It was just a small wound. A very small wound. Compared to the serious injuries he had on the battlefield when facing life and death, it was not worth mentioning. But when she said let go of his hand, he couldn't help but let go. The girl's soft fingers held his hand. The soft handkerchief gently wrapped around the back of his hand and tied a knot, wrapping the wound. She said with satisfaction, it's done. And because he let go of the sword in his hand, he switched to the other hand and immediately pointed it at Yuan Xian's neck. Yuan Xian lay on the ground with an uncomfortable expression. When he saw Wei Wei Bai standing beside him, he pursed his lips and reached out to touch her skirt. But he thought of something and shrank back, not daring to touch. He was afraid that Lu Xinglan would take her anger out on her. He didn't have any ability to protect her now. How could he put her in an even more embarrassing situation? Thinking of this, Yuan Xian took a deep breath and suppressed the pain in his chest and abdomen. Then he said, Lu Xinglan, I didn't touch her, not even once. Lu Xinglan lowered her head and looked at the handkerchief in her hand. She didn't expect Yuan Xian to say this. She looked at Yuan Xian coldly. But he said, hearing you say that makes me want to kill you even more. Yuan Xian was confused. Lu Xinglan laughed coldly. Do you think I don't know what kind of person you are? There aren't many people in the world who are as selfish as you. How much do you like her? You'd rather admit that you're not good than let me misunderstand her. No one was stupid. Yuan Xian dared to say this because he was usually cold to women and had no children in his harem. Who wouldn't immediately think of his body? Yuan Xian was expressionless. Don't hurt her. She didn't do anything wrong to you. Lu Xinglan looked at him coldly for a while. Her ink-black eyes were incomparably deep. Suddenly, he threw the sword to the side, then turned around and reached out his hand to hold Wei Wei Bai's waist, while his other hand passed under her knees. After lifting her up easily and forcefully, he walked to the table and placed her on it. The dress draped over the edge of the table, as beautiful as a flower in full bloom. Lu Xinglan's fingers tightened around her waist. His grip was so strong that it hurt. He sucked on the tip of her ear with his thin lips, and his breath brushed past her cheek. It was like a vicious threat. It was also like a helpless plea. Don't do this in the future. Wei Wei Bai blinked and was about to say something. Lu Xinglan had already let go of her. He turned around, grabbed Yuan Xian's collar, and dragged him out. Yuan Xian grabbed his collar fiercely and shouted angrily to get some breathing space. Lu Xinglan, you can kill me, but you can't humiliate me. Kill me. Save button. Chapter 2875. Lu Xinglan walked out of the pouring rain expressionlessly. As he dragged Yuan Xian, he said calmly, "Shut up, I want to beat you up now." After saying that, he dragged Yuan Xian out. In the heavy rain, Lu Xinglan did not use a weapon, but he beat Yuan Xian up. Wei Weibai watched the show calmly with the system. As a bystander, she had no sincerity to watch the show. Wei Weibai said, "I'm really a disaster. The country is in chaos because of my beauty. Men kill each other because of my beauty. I think I should kill myself to apologize to the world." The system chewed on the creamy melon seeds and agreed. The time has been changed. The strategy time is 3 months. Bai Weiwei was very calm. As long as we don't wait until the end of time, there are still benefits. It took 3 months to force the turtle Lu Wugui to rebel. The favorability won't fill up in a short time. Although Lu Xinglan knew that she gave him the prescription, and he did not have good things with the little emperor. But it would be strange if he did not think about the details of her interactions with the little emperor. He did not kill the little emperor just now. It was also because he doubted her feelings for the little emperor. If he killed her, what if she treated a dead person as white moonlight? After all, a living person could not compete with a dead person. It would be best to torture the person she had some feelings for into a dog. She did not like it. Just killing her was in line with Lu Xinglan's calm and sinister personality. That was why he did not kill the little emperor for the time being, but sneaked out to beat him. If he was beaten up miserably, she would not like the little emperor so weak and useless. Lu Xinglan's thoughts were so straightforward. Wei Weibai could see it even if she was blind. She heard the little emperor scream in the heavy rain outside the door. She sighed. Yuan Xian is so pitiful. He has to live under Turtle Lu's tyranny and can't resist. Although Yuan Xian was cruel and selfish, as a member of the royal family, he had not done anything good. To kill Lu Xinglan, he led the wolf into the house and cooperated with the North to kill people. It was stupid and bad, but he was still a good child. Those who said that she was pretty were all good kids. As for Turtle Lu, she had the last 2 points of favorability left. If she wasn't sure that she didn't have any feelings for the little emperor, don't even think that he will rise. This man was tolerant, fussy, and coquettish. If she didn't give him any benefits and let him confirm that she really didn't have any improper feelings for the little emperor, his 100 points of favorability wouldn't last for 3 months. Even if it was 300 years later, everyone's corpses would have rotted into bone dregs. Don't even think about Turtle Lu increasing the last 2 points of favorability. In the torrential rain, the Yuan rabbit's screams gradually weakened. But when the palace gates opened, the sound of iron hooves of the army entering could be clearly heard. Wei Weibai sat at the table and chatted with the system who was munching on melon seeds. When the familiar sound of footsteps came from outside the door, only then did she adjust her emotions. A trace of forbearance appeared in her eyes, but she did not move. Instead, she sat obediently on the table. It was as if he was waiting for someone. Lu Xinglan was drenched from head to toe in the rain. With his back to the door, he slowly walked over. His entire body was filled with killing intent, and his cold eyes carried a bloodthirsty aura. It was the cruelty and coldness that he had been on the battlefield for a long time during this period of time. He stopped in his tracks, raised his ink-colored eyes, and silently looked at the girl sitting at the table. There seemed to be a trace of worry between her eyebrows. Who was she worried about? Lu Xinglan pursed his lips. The army behind him had already approached the bedroom. Xian Wu took the lead. He waved his hand and asked everyone to dismount. Chapter 2876. The well-trained soldiers dismounted one after another and did not move. No one fought for the wealth of the harem, nor did they touch any of the palace maids. They were like silent mountains, silently waiting for someone's orders. Wei Wei Bai also noticed it. Her bright red lips curled up slightly. "Young master, you can go out. Everyone is waiting for you. I'll go out for a while." After all, if people knew that he snatched this position for a woman, it would not help him in inheriting the throne. It would only make the world think that he was another incapable ruler. Lu Xinglan had just taken the throne and had too many things to do. There was no need to add more trouble like her. Lu Xinglan saw that she did not ask Yuan Xian what was wrong. He heaved a sigh of relief and reached out to wipe the water stains on his face. Then he raised his hand and began to unbuckle his armor. He bent down and threw away the cold short blade that would hurt her and all kinds of small weapons on his body. The heavy armor fell to the ground. The man stepped over these iron armors and came to the table. He lowered his eyes and held her face to kiss her. His body was hot. Even if it was wet, it was still hot. His wet palms were warm. The kiss was filled with a desperate warmth that she could not avoid. Her body trembled. She wanted to avoid it, but she could not. Finally, Lu Xinglan was satisfied and left her for a while. His voice was hoarse by her lips. "Do you think I care about this? You like this country, this position, so what if I steal it and imprison you? Avoid it? Or can you avoid it?" At this point, he laughed softly. There was a desperate ruthlessness in his eyes. "Even if I'm an incapable ruler, you have to be a vixen by his side. You can't leave me." She wanted to escape. Let him be a good emperor without any stains. This kind of thinking was good, but it was easy for her to avoid him. Because in this war, where countless people died, she had no name. She had no responsibility. Let him sit in this cold, high position alone and bear all the good and bad things. It was too easy for her. She did not want to be famous, but he let her be. He wanted to let the whole world know that she was the demoness who brought disaster to the country, the original sin that had bewitched him, Lu Xinglan, into rebelling. Unwilling to let her escape, Lu Xinglan reached out and slid her hand down her thin back. Then, she easily picked her up and walked out. Xin Wu stood at the door. He opened a large oil paper umbrella and held it up, covering Lu Xinglan as she stepped out of the door. It was mainly to cover Wei Wei Bai. They were all men. Why would they be afraid of rain? It was just that girls were too troublesome. Moreover, she was clearly delicate and weak, yet she could still cause chaos in the world. That was even more troublesome. Wei Wei Bai was carried out by him, facing the dense horde of soldiers. There was also a group of old officials who had come to celebrate. The torrential rain was so cold that it splashed onto Wei Wei Bai's ankles, making her flinch. Lu Xinglan lowered her head and seemed to have sensed it. She took a step back so that the umbrella could cover her better. His back was drenched by the rain. The armor was cold, so he took it off before hugging her. The rain was cold. He took a few steps back so that she wouldn't get wet. After all, her body was weak. He couldn't hurt her. Lu Xinglan thought expressionlessly. Then, he looked at the soldiers coldly. The old officials who had come to carry out the ascension ceremony had just taken out all kinds of documents, jade seals, and court robes. They didn't have time to say anything dignified. However, they saw that Lu Xinglan was carrying a girl in his arms. How could this be? Chapter 2877. Before they could say anything, Lu Xinglan's voice was clear and powerful. It was terrifyingly calm. "I won't say any more nonsense about righteousness. The Lu family has been loyal for generations. In this generation, I am an unfilial son who is ashamed to face my ancestors. I disrespected the royal family and the court. I rebelled and started a war. I was heartless to the people. In the end, I ended up like this because of a woman. I am unjust to all of you." These words were too rebellious. Everyone was stunned, especially those ministers. The little emperor, who was leaning against the pillar in the rain and shivering in pain with a bruised and swollen face, also looked up in a daze. Lu Xinglan stood under the umbrella. His cold face was perfect like an ice sculpture. He was so calm that he didn't have a trace of humanity. He was full of murderous aura, but he carefully turned his body to block the cold rain. Everyone's eyes couldn't help but fall on the girl in his arms. Her soft and beautiful figure and her garnet dress were the most eye-catching color. It flowed down Lu Xinglan's arm. The girl's black hair was like satin. The corners of her charming eyes were pink. The flower between her eyebrows was exquisite. In this dark and heavy rain background, in the darkness surrounded by the army, she was soul-stirringly beautiful. This was the reason why Lu Xinglan rebelled. A woman. Even if it was true, he couldn't say it so directly. What would the people think if they heard? Lu Xinglan had just taken the throne. If his reputation spread like this, wouldn't he be like Yuan Xian, a tyrant and incapable ruler? A few ministers were about to go forward and persuade him. It was up to him to like a woman, but he still had to say it nicely. It was fine even if he said it was for the people. But before they could carry him out, Xian Wu pulled out his sword with one hand. Lu Xinglan's words were as cold as that sword. A new emperor must see blood when he takes the throne. Whoever dares to take a step forward today will be sacrificed to the throne. These words were not said by a tyrant, but by a tyrant. Women brought disaster to the country. Foxy charms troubled the world. Everyone looked at Lu Xinglan in shock. Lu Xinglan lowered his eyes and pursed his lips. After a moment of silence, he finally slowed down his voice. "It's too cold outside. I'll carry you in." He saw her look at him strangely. He seemed to be frightened as well. Lu Xinglan hesitated for a moment before explaining. "This way, you can only stay by my side. Because I'm a tyrant and you're a vixen, you have to bear the consequences of my sins. This is the price you have to pay for leaving me." Actually, he just wanted everyone to know. All he wanted was her. What was this country worth? After declaring his sovereignty over her, he turned around and walked inside. At the same time, he raised his eyes and glanced coldly at Yuan Xian, who was lying by the pillar, half paralyzed. No matter how much affection she had for him, Lu Xinglan wanted to get rid of them one by one. The emperor's bedroom was filled with fresh flowers. Lu Xinglan didn't ask anyone to take them away. She just put her on the bed. Then he began to undress. His clothes were wet. Wei Wei Bai quietly looked up at him, only to see him go out and get a bucket of water to wash up at the door. It was a rough and quick way of washing up. Lu Xinglan walked in dripping wet and casually grabbed a piece of cloth to wipe herself. A eunuch ran over with new clothes. He knew that the palace was going to have a new master. Therefore, everything was done according to the appearance of the new master. Lu Xinglan changed her clothes and told everyone to get lost. The door closed. Wei Wei Bai felt like she was a decoration. From the beginning to the end, his movements were swift and clean, but he didn't look at her, as if he was enduring something. Finally, Lu Xinglan walked over and pushed her down. Then he pulled down the curtain and lay down. The girl curled up on the inside of the bed, feeling a little helpless. He stretched out his long arms, scooped up her soft body, and hugged her. It was a tight hug, like a confining embrace. Then he closed his eyes, which were bloodshot from exhaustion. He didn't say anything and just hugged her like this. Finally, he sighed. "You're finally back." It was no longer an illusion. He finally hugged her. The body that had been holding on for this period of time finally relaxed. Sleepiness hit him. He closed his eyes and hugged the soft body of her to sleep. Half asleep, she seemed to reach out and touch his face. He loosened some of the confinement. She covered him with the blanket again. Lu Xinglan's furrowed brows finally smoothed out. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 99. Slash. Chapter 2878. On the day Lu Xinglan ascended the throne, the sky was clear. The civil and military officials knelt inside and outside the main hall. The scene was unusually grand. It was different from the old royal family. The Xian dynasty was in a state of prosperity. The officials with some ambition were rolling up their sleeves and waiting for a big fight. The new emperor was good in every way and strong in every way. The northern country was overjoyed when they heard that the southern country was in chaos. In the end, when they heard that the rebellion had stopped, the winner was Lu Xinglan, and the dynasty had changed. The northern country was in mourning. They could only be suppressed by the southern country in the future. If the country was not destroyed, they could only ask for peace. Therefore, The northern country's attendants came to the southern country with a series of conditions to celebrate the establishment of the new dynasty. In addition, they reduced taxes and appeased the people. There was no possibility of the new dynasty being overthrown. From the sound of it, wasn't Lu Xinglan the wise emperor that all the civil and military officials dreamed of? Except the imperial concubine sitting beside Lu Xinglan. It was said that she was going to be promoted to empress directly. But Wei Bai didn't want to be too fast. Lu Xinglan asked someone to let her be the imperial concubine first. After he ascended the throne, he would pick an auspicious day to promote her. Anyway, the entire harem was empty. She was the only one. She could do anything she wanted. And Lu Xinglan said that he wanted to be the incapable ruler of this vixen. He had really done something preposterous. On the day of his ascension, he set up a seat beside the throne. He let her sit at the side and accept the worship of the officials. She wanted the world to immediately know how much she had bewitched the emperor's heart. Let her become completely famous. Lu Xinglan didn't care about this reputation at all. No matter what the officials said, he ignored it. He even fought. Anyway, he said himself that he fought for this position for a woman. If it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have done it. She had never seen such a willful and reckless emperor. Lu Xinglan used to be such a steady person. He suddenly became muddle-headed. It must be that woman's charm. Wei Bai was bored and sat with Lu Xinglan like a wax statue. The ascension process was long. She felt that Lu Xinglan was a vengeful person. He knew that he was tired, but he still insisted on pulling her. He definitely couldn't bear to see her well. Didn't they see how those civil officials looked at her with grief and indignation? It wasn't easy to go through the process of ascension, but when it came time to worship the heavens, women couldn't go. However, Lu Xinglan was still holding her hand. She didn't want to touch her, and she didn't want to go. He found it tiring. He wanted to pull her along. The two of them were wrestling with each other. Lu Xinglan suddenly turned around and bit her ear, whispering, "If you continue to struggle, I'll carry you and let the heavens see the woman I like." Wei Bai, ever since the rebellion, Lu Xinglan had become more and more shameless. He saw them standing together to worship the heavens and their ancestors. Many civil officials died of heart attacks on the spot. This was simply the behavior of an incapable ruler. However, when he thought about how powerful Lu Xinglan was, he felt that he could only lose his head because he liked a woman. Everything else was pretty good. They had experienced the preposterous royal family of the previous dynasty and sincerely did not want to go back. Therefore, he could only tolerate Lu Xinglan's actions. He had no choice but to do so. What else could he do? Was it a revolt? Just wait for Lu Xinglan to cut his neck. When they were worshipping, Lu Xinglan pulled her into his arms. He pursed his thin lips slightly, and his dark eyes were deep. They stood high, and below them were countless kneeling ministers. Further away was the bustling palace. There were mountains stretching out, and there was a vast expanse of water. The grandeur was shocking. Is this landscape beautiful? The man's low voice gently pressed against her ear. Comma. Chapter 2879. Between breaths, he saw that her ears were red. She said awkwardly, "You're too ridiculous." Lu Xinglan smiled, then reached out and touched the flower in her hair. The delicate petals reminded him of the feeling of her lying in his arms last night. His eyes darkened a little. No matter how beautiful it is, it's not as beautiful as you. So his absurdity. It was all her fault. Wei Bai felt that ever since Turtle Lu opened his green turtle shell, he simply went from the path of an incapable ruler to no return. What was worse was that he fainted in front of her, but he didn't faint anywhere else. As a result, those ministers wrote poems to scold her every day. They said that she was so beautiful that she could bring disaster to the country. But they didn't dare to scold Lu Xinglan. Wei Bai said, "Good scolding, scold more, quickly scold." She was scolded like this every day. She felt refreshed. As for the little emperor, he was locked in the dungeon. She wanted to see the little rabbit. After all, it was a good child who said that she was beautiful. Lu Xinglan said with a dark face, Mention it again, and I'll bring his head to you tomorrow. The ruthless side of Tyrant. He was already targeting her, and the favorability was always at 99. He held on tightly to the last point and refused to give it up. More than half of the 3 months passed slowly. Wei Wei Bai lived a life of being scolded by people writing poems every day, being served by a bunch of flattering people, and being doted on by a muddle-headed and ruthless tyrant. If it wasn't for the change of the waiting time, this kind of drunken and shameless life, actually it wasn't bad. The system eating the platinum metal beef jerky silently praised. Life was indeed better. He had grown taller. The sidewatch was the best person. He wanted to make a monument for the sidewatch and pray to it every day, haha. Wei Wei Bai didn't have anything to do. Anyway, Lu Xinglan's favorability wouldn't increase. His thoughts were too heavy. The time she entered the palace and made rouge happily with the little emperor was a thorn. It stabbed Lu Xinglan to the point of rebellion. It also stabbed Lu Xinglan to the point that he was still a little wary of her. Even after she became an imperial concubine, she still made rouge every day. Lu Xinglan, on the other hand, began to urge the embroiderers to embroider her empress formal attire. She ignored this. She let the palace maids pick the flowers and let the eunuchs recite the poems that the civil officials scolded her. She loved it when civil officials scolded her about her appearance. After all, every line of the poem said that she was beautiful. If he didn't mention her beauty, he couldn't possibly call her ugly, right? Lu Xinglan had spoiled her enough. If she said that Wei Wei Bai was ugly, wouldn't it make Lu Xinglan even more confused? After all, he doted on an ugly woman to this extent. How shameless! Where was the prestige of a great country? Even if the emperor was muddle-headed, he had to be muddle-headed with reason. Yes, it must be because Foxy was too beautiful. How could such an outstanding His Majesty be bewitched? It was all the fox spirit's fault for being too beautiful. This point of view led to all the words used to scold by Wei Wei. You're too beautiful. You're beautiful without humanity. Beautiful enough to confuse the emperor. Beautiful enough to judge yourself to thank the world. Wei Wei Bai. Ah, I'm so happy to hear that. Reward them all. System. But you're still short of 1 point. Lu Wugui, this point was hard to get. Wei Wei Bai was applying lipstick on her lips. The bright red rouge was smeared on her lips, glossy and bright. She applied some thin powder on her fingers and gently rubbed it on her face. There was no limit to beauty. She reached out and closed the lipstick box. There was still some red powder on her white fingertips. It was bright red. Wei Wei Bai held the hairpin in her hair. Under the hairpin, there were 2 fresh flowers with dew on them. She felt that her days were good, so she was not in a hurry. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come over here, /transmigration system. Prince Charming, come over here, / transmigration system. Prince Charming, come over here. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come over here. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come over here. Chapter 2880. She glanced at the mirror and recited a few lines to herself. The imperial concubine brought disaster to the country and the people because she was too beautiful. Wei Wei Bai stood up slowly. Yes, I remember. Let's go. The system took a bite of the expensive burger. Where are you going? Wei Wei Bai. To work. Aren't you going to earn points? Tomorrow is the time. If we don't, the main mission will fail. After saying that, she grabbed an old palace made beside her and asked her to lead the way to the dungeon. She had been used to being a tyrant in the harem recently. Lu Xinglan was obedient and put her first. She just didn't earn points. The people in the palace were all snobs. Seeing that she was so favored, how could they disobey her? Moreover, Lu Xinglan forgot to give a strict order that she was not allowed to visit the former emperor. The little emperor didn't have a good life. But the dungeon wasn't a place for torture. He lived in the best cell and cleaned it every day. He wore simple cloth clothes and shoes and ate simple food. There were also a few books to pass the time. Lu Xinglan didn't torture him. He just locked him up and didn't let him out to be an eyesore. What he meant was that they should just kill him. Otherwise, he would raise her. If he tortured the abolished emperor, what if Wei Wei Bai heard that he was very miserable and wanted to protect him. Would she feel pity for Yuan Xian again, and think of the days they spent together after Yuan Xian snatched her into the palace? Lu Xinglan never hid his pettiness. He didn't even give Wei Wei by the slightest chance of remembering Yuan Xian. Yuan Xian was living well. He didn't lack food and drink. No one tortured him. He was also clean. He couldn't act pitiful. In any case, he was a wealthy emperor who lived like a prince and had to be waited on for everything. He was thrown into a simple and damned place with no freedom and raised as an ordinary person. It was already considered torture. Lu Xinglan didn't believe that he would be raised for 8 to 10 years. Wei Wei Bai could still think about this little bastard. Yes, he was still disgusted by the news he got when he entered the palace. He was jealous. That was why the little emperor did not die of illness. When Wei Wei Bai arrived at the dungeon, the guards spread out a carpet and hurriedly expressed their apologies. The dungeon has been cleaned, but Imperial Consort, you are a noble. How could you step into this kind of place? Your feet can't be hurt by the cold ground. Who dared to make Wei Wei Bai uncomfortable? He wished he could worship her like a bodhisattva. She was the current emperor's precious treasure, and the entire country was fought for her. Every day, the empty seat next to Lu Xinglan was hers. She was not willing to attend court. Lu Xinglan was also unwilling to take the chair away. This honor and power made Wei Wei Bai a treasure wherever she went. The little emperor sat with a haggard face. He lowered his head and used a small stone to draw flowers on the wall. At first, he didn't notice when Wei Wei Bai was standing outside. No one here was willing to talk to him. After a long time, he stopped talking. Even his attention was scattered. The only thing that comforted him was the painting on the wall. They often planted different flowers. Outside the cell, someone brought a chair for her to sit on. She leaned against the chair and let the person leave. The cell was suddenly empty. Only the emperor and Wei Wei Bai were left. Yuan Xian also only realized later. He turned around in a daze and saw a girl sitting outside the locked cell. She was even more beautiful. Her luxurious clothes could not suppress her beauty at all. A string of 18 colored glaze beads hung on her delicate wrist. The beautiful tassels fell under her sleeves and were on the verge of falling. Her beautiful face was painted with light makeup, and her lips were red and moist. She was so beautiful that it made people feel that she was being served with the most luxurious things. They were all her foils. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com to facilitate your next reading. You can click on you can see it when you open the bookshelf next time, if you like. Chapter 2881. Wei Wei Bai looked at him calmly. On the contrary, Yuan Xian was a little anxious. He hurriedly flicked his sleeves, tidied up his appearance, and ran to the door, looking at her foolishly. She also looked at him. Both of them looked a little silly. With great difficulty, the little emperor stammered, "Don't come to see me. What if that guy is unhappy and doesn't treat you well?" In fact, he was very good to her. Everyone in the world knew that Lu Xinglan had lost his mind for a woman. No one could treat her better. Even the little emperor felt that Lu Xinglan's kindness to her was a kind of reckless kindness. No one was allowed to hurt her. No one was allowed to treat her badly. The entire harem was filled with people who Lu Xinglan jumped out to serve her. On the contrary, wherever she went, there was not a single word that was not good to her. She was dressed in splendor, and her eyes were full of wealth. Lu Xinglan raised her too well. The little emperor looked at her eagerly. After she left, he could rely on this memory to be happy for a long time. Wei Wei Bai let him look at her. After a while, only then did she get up from the chair. Hidden in the lavender tassel was a key. She lowered her head and opened the door with the key. Go to Jiangnan and be a rich young master. I bought you real estate, fields, and a sum of money. You have a few loyal servants waiting for you there. The little emperor was still suitable to live like a prince. It was best not to worry about anything. He didn't have to bear too much, and he didn't have to live so violently, restlessly, and so bad. Yuan Xian saw the door open, and his eyes reddened. He immediately snatched her key and threw it away, then closed the door again. Don't worry about me. If I leave, Lu Xinglan will suspect that you like me. Wei Wei Bai heard the system prompt. The tortoise male lead came to catch her in the act. She adjusted her tone, calm and composed. Do you think I don't like you? Yuan Xian was stunned. He looked up at her and into the girl's eyes. Her eyes were very calm, and there was no trace of warmth for him. Even if she said that she wanted to accompany him, she was just pitying him. He smiled and said hoarsely, You don't like her. The only person you like is Lu Xinglan, right? Wei Wei Bai stood outside the cell. She listened to the little emperor say, You have never had the slightest affection for me. You only pitied me for sitting on the throne. Instead, I used your pity to make you treat me better, that's all. He thought of the days they spent together. He couldn't help but laugh. When I was taking Chinese medicine, you were sitting with me. When I said I wanted a woman, you immediately moved away. You weren't willing to touch me at all, but that's because I've never been in your heart. From the beginning to the end, she rejected his touch. Feeling pity for him and loving him were not the same thing. He understood. The little emperor helplessly touched his somewhat messy hair. You only came to see me because you feel bad. Don't come. The person you love is clearly Lu Xinglan. Live well with him. I'm just a bully who snatched you into the palace. Wei Wei Bai, the little emperor was very obedient. She was here today to untie the knot in Lu Xinglan's heart. She had never had the slightest bit of love for the little emperor. This had to be admitted by the little emperor. Otherwise, Lu Xinglan would be suspicious if she explained for a long time. Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips and didn't deny it. She just said lightly, I asked for your plague treatment prescription and promised to accompany you, but I broke my promise. I'll feel more at ease if you go to Jiangnan to live a good life. The little emperor was extremely pitiful. If I go to Jiangnan, I'll never see you again. / at the bottom to record this reading record. Chapter 2882. Locked in the palace dungeon. He could at least hope to hear news about her. He could see the flowers she saw, or she could see him once. Wei Wei Bai looked at him calmly for a while before sighing. You won't see me in the future if you stay here. This sentence was so faint that he couldn't think of anything else. The little emperor didn't think much about it, and just lowered his head sadly. She said, The door is open. Go out yourself if you want to. Someone will help you. She was now an imperial concubine, so she had her own connections. It was easier for her to do anything when others supported her. After all, who didn't love power and wealth? And she was now synonymous with power and wealth. And she turned around and walked out. Walking out of the prison door, a slender figure appeared against the light. The man's side profile was exquisite and beautiful, and his eyes were deep and dark. When he saw her, he pursed his lips and frowned. Why did you come to see him? His tone was unusually bad, but there was no trace of anger in his eyes. Wei Wei Bai knew that he heard their conversation just now. She also knew that the knot in his heart was probably half solved. Lu Xinglan still needed to slowly figure out the rest. Unfortunately, she didn't have time, so she would help him solve the knot in his heart now. She took a few steps forward and didn't say anything. She just smiled at him. The young girl stood under the light with a beautiful smile, but with a sweet and innocent feeling. Her charm was natural, and every word of hers could hook one's heart. Lu Xinglan's eyes froze on her face, and he forgot all the questions. She stretched out her hand, and Lu Xinglan couldn't help but reach out and hold it. Then he let her out. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, Let's go to the pavilion to see the scenery. The pavilion was the highest place in the palace, and it was used for bounties. Lu Xinglan stopped in his tracks, then turned around, carried her up, and ran up. His qigong was good, and he soon reached the pavilion. Wei Wei Bai came out of his arms and sat down tiredly. Behind her was the scenery. She looked sideways and put her fingers on the railing. Then she said softly, I hate this scenery. When Yuan Xian took me into the palace, I wanted to keep my chastity for you. After all, I'm your woman. These words were said calmly. Lu Xinglan recalled that she was indeed unhappy at the beginning, but in the end, her heart softened towards Yuan Xian. He did not say anything. After hearing Yuan Xian's words, his mood still improved quite a bit. Just as he was about to say something, his expression softened. However, he saw Wei Wei take out a handkerchief and wipe the corner of her mouth. She had applied too much lipstick and the handkerchief was stained red. It was a bit scary. Wei Wei looked at the handkerchief and blinked. Then, she looked up with a smile still on her face. The color of the rouge is really beautiful, young master. Lu Xinglan was taken aback, and a trace of confusion appeared in her eyes. A strange uneasiness appeared in his heart. However, he saw Wei Wei smile sweetly. I like to make these rouges. Yuan Xian is watching me too closely. I won't die. Lu Xinglan felt even more uneasy. He took a few steps forward and reached out to touch her. A gust of wind blew over, causing her ink-black hair to flutter lightly. A trace of bright red appeared on her pink and white face. The red of her lips was too beautiful and too unreal. She was still smiling softly. The day I entered the palace, my reputation was already ruined. I don't deserve to be by your side. The poison in the rouge is just a type of Chinese medicine, but it works with the rouge I make. I apply it every day, and the poison accumulates in my body bit by bit. I thought that when Yuan Xian's beastly nature would erupt, I would take a mouthful of the rouge and die to protect my body. Slash. Chapter 2883. These words were said with a smile. She pressed the handkerchief against her lips, but she couldn't wipe away the redness on her lips. She had never been so colorful since she recovered from her illness. I've never let you down, Lu Xinglan. She smiled sweetly, her fingers resting on the railing, her beautiful face full of happy smiles. I'm guarding the status you gave me. Guarding for one person. Guarding for one person's grave. Wei Wei Bai's lips were bright red, and the rouge she applied every day was poisonous. She pursed her lips and smiled lightly, her eyes bright, without the slightest bit of depression before death. Lu Xinglan only felt that everything in front of him was in a trance. The background of the pale sky, the girl was the only color. This strong contrast, it made her more bright and beautiful, but made this more pale and hazy. He realized that his vision was in a trance, causing this illusion. Intense emotions caused a huge burden on his body. He took 2 steps forward, but he still didn't feel anything. He could only reach out and gently pinch her fingers. Looking at the red rouge on her lips, he whispered, Wei Wei Bai, don't anger me. She was angry that he didn't understand her during this period of time, and she lied to take revenge on him. His voice softened. I'm just angry that I didn't have the ability to let Yuan Xian take you away. I'm not angry at you. Wei Wei Bai was still smiling. She reached out and tucked a strand of messy hair on his cheek behind his ear. Gentle as water, but also gentle as poison. Yuan Xian was jealous of you and harmed you. You're a subject destined to suffer. Her voice was soft, and her eyes were warm. I don't want you to live under the oppression of the royal family for the rest of your life. I want you to live well, so no one can touch you. That's why I forced you to rebel and fight for this position. Her fingertips gently fell to his chin. Finally, she gently held his face with both hands and pressed her forehead against his. Her breath was soft. So don't hate me, young master. I just want you to be well. That's why I let you walk on that path that's destined to be filled with blood. Lu Xinglan stared at her blankly for a while. Suddenly, her mind was struck by lightning, and she came to her senses. The lipstick she made was poisonous. No, that was why the rouge was poisonous. She was poisoned. Without any hesitation, he pulled her into his arms and jumped down, the tips of his feet touching the roof tiles. She ran with all her might in the direction of the Imperial Hospital. There were not many doctors in the Imperial Hospital. Because of the rebellion, many doctors ran away to hide in advance. The wind blew across Wei Wei Bai's face, messing up her hair. Wei Wei Bai calmly and elegantly tidied her hair. Lu Xinglan ran very fast. If her hair was messed up, it wouldn't look good. Fortunately, her hair was tied up with many tricks. Even if she were to bungee jump, she would still look extremely good. Even some of the loose strands of hair were specially chosen so that when they fell, they would only add to the natural beauty. She wouldn't have her hair blown all over her face like Sadako's. It was beautiful, but it was also a technical job. The system finally spoke. Is your rouge poisonous? Wei Wei Bai said faintly, yes, no one knows that I poisoned it. No one knew. The system didn't know either. He had checked the rouge. After all, Wei Wei Bai was in the palace every day. She was also someone who wished for the world to be in chaos. Those women in the harem wouldn't be able to watch her be arrogant. There were some in the harem, but they were too lowly. He checked the clothes, food, drinks, and so on every day. Slash. Chapter 2884. You can search Transmigration System. Prince Charming, come to search book www.sashu.com in Baidu to find the S. All of them filtered out a bunch of inexplicable hidden weapons and poisons. So if the rouge was poisonous, why couldn't he detect it? The system was about to raise its doubts. Wei Wei Bai sighed. I haven't poisoned it yet. I just didn't adjust the proportion of lipstick properly, so there was a shade of red, causing it to be unusually red. Coincidentally, Turtle Lou came over, so I thought of a story to fool him and get the last point of affection. System, I forgot about the host's ability to make up stories. The host has the talent of becoming a world-class best-selling author. Damn it, can I still hear a sentence of truth from the host's mouth? Do you have any sincerity? Wei Wei Bai said, hurry up. We're almost at the Imperial Hospital. Poison me. The system flipped through the supermarket shelves expressionlessly. I know. I'll poison you now. Then it found a poison similar to the crane's head red. Eating it would cause a slow-acting state of poison. Wei Wei Bai reminded, remember to poison all my rouge. It can be detected, but it's not heavy. The poison can be disguised as a Chinese medicine from this world. Change its properties and mix it with some specific flowers to become a poison. The system nodded calmly. This was its host. She had 0 failures. She wanted to get everything, leaving nothing out. She was simply a mature host. The system sighed and praised her as it poisoned her. He could finally retire and become a full-time food broadcaster. That's right, he had recently started a food broadcaster in the system world and the food in the side menu. It was glittering, and his fans were in the millions. All the losers were kneeling in front of his luxurious 3 meals and 2 midnight snacks. Someone was calling him Tycoon Daddy again. How refreshing. And he could get reward from the live stream. He felt like he was going to return to being a tycoon again. The poison was administered in time, and the moment she was placed on the recliner, the doctors surrounded her. Wei Wei Bai's face turned ugly. The red faded, and her face was excessively pale, making the lipstick on her lips even redder. Her eyes were half closed as she leaned weakly in Lu Xinglan's arms. His fingers held her hand tightly. The man's body was unusually cold. There was even a slight tremble that could not be controlled. Some people, when extremely nervous and frightened, would suddenly lose their temperature, their hands and feet would become cold, their muscles would become stiff, and they would begin to tremble like crazy. He was afraid. He was very scared. When the doctor saw the expression on Wei Wei Bai's face, he was scared out of his wits. It was obvious that he was poisoned. It was difficult to save him. She poured one bowl of medicine after another into Wei Wei Bai's mouth. She could only drag on with her remaining life. Her eyes were cold and calm. Even when she couldn't take it anymore and spat out the medicine, her expression was still indifferent. It was as if he had been waiting for this day. She said that she had to keep her chastity for a man. He didn't want to live anymore after being snatched into the palace. It was just that he couldn't find a chance to die, so he could only use such minute and terrifying methods day by day to exhaust his life. This was a slow-acting poison. The imperial physicians studied the lipstick and rouge and found that this traditional Chinese medicine was also found in the imperial hospital, and it was very common. Therefore, when Wei Wei Bai picked up the rouge, no one was suspicious. They thought that it was just to add a little fragrance. In the end, when combined with some flowers, it was poison. For so many days, she had used this rouge every day. Even the lipstick was on her lips. Who knew how much she had eaten? This was suicide. There was no saving her. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the Chapter 2885. The imperial physicians didn't dare to say. They could only try their best to delay her death. Lu Xinglan didn't ask. He didn't drag these useless imperial physicians out to behead her. His face was unusually pale. It was even paler than the poison Wei Wei Bai. It was even cold. He didn't have any expression. He just quietly stared at Wei Wei Bai. He held her in his arms, fed her medicine, and watched her life slowly fade away in his arms. He seemed to be a little slow and didn't realize that she was about to die. Or maybe he didn't dare to think too deeply. In the end, the imperial physicians really had no choice but to use the most powerful prescription. It wasn't to save her life. It was to relieve Wei Wei Bai's pain. It couldn't be treated. It could only make Wei Wei Bai feel better. A fearless imperial physician knelt down and said to Lu Xinglan, "The poison has entered the imperial consort's internal organs. It's burning and corroding. That kind of intense pain is not something a person can endure. We can only ask for His Majesty's mercy and allow us to let the imperial consort have a safe journey. It would be safe and painless before her death." It was also the best kind of comfort. The imperial physicians thought that Lu Xinglan would kill them in a rage or drag them all out to be beheaded. However, they found that Lu Xinglan didn't say anything. He didn't even look at them. Instead, he looked at Wei Wei Bai from beginning to end. She frowned as if she was really in pain. However, she didn't show too much of a sorry appearance. Lu Xinglan's black eyes were half covered by his eyelashes. They were dead silent and even seemed a little silly. It was Wei Wei Bai who forced a smile and said to the imperial physicians, "You can drug her. I'll bear the consequences." The imperial physicians looked up at Lu Xinglan. They found that the emperor was silly. There was no reaction at all. They could only look at each other and immediately run to get the medicine. Meanwhile, Lu Xinglan finally recovered from his stiff state. His trembling fingers suddenly pressed against her back. A gust of warm, true energy entered her body. Her face turned slightly red, but it was useless. Life was like an hourglass. It couldn't stop flowing away. Wei Wei Bai stretched out her fingertips and gently touched his arm. She tilted her head, her expression serene. "The day you entered the palace, the poison had already entered your bones. You just didn't show any obvious signs of fatigue." Her voice was low and weak, but there was still a trace of pain in it. "I'm just a weak woman. I can only do this to protect my reputation after being kidnapped into the palace." Lu Xinglan suddenly whispered, "Reputation?" It was only then that he reacted. His eyes turned red, and his tone became fierce. "What reputation do I want? I want you. Even if your life is a mess, and you're really with Yuan Xian, just wait for me to snatch you back. That's not what I care about." He was angry. He was so angry that she couldn't keep her heart. She was gentle to him, Yuan Xian. If it was only about the body, no matter how jealous he was, it would not be towards her. He would only hate himself for being incompetent and letting her get hurt. Lu Xinglan's thin lips trembled. His voice was so hoarse that it seemed to be scraped from his throat. "Why do you care? Why?" His fingers nervously began to wipe the rouge from her lips. "You like this, so you're using it to kill yourself?" He could not understand. This was a way to die that he could not understand at all. He knew how strict the pedantic etiquette of the Southern Empire was. A woman's chastity was also very important. Women were taught from a young age to be faithful to one person and not to be fickle. But he did not expect that she would care about this. She actually began to commit suicide because she was kidnapped into the palace. Slash. Chapter 2886. This was crazy. How could she do this? Was it all for those illusory and unreasonable teachings? Lu Xinglan had never been so angry before. His true qi could not suppress the poison. When his fingertips left her back, he pressed down on the corner of the table beside him and smashed it apart. Wei Wei Bai looked at him blankly. After a moment of silence, she suddenly laughed. "Young master, this has nothing to do with rules. I just want to be faithful to you until the end. Even if I have to use my life, I want to protect my promise to you. How can a woman who is unfaithful to you be worthy of guarding your grave?" She reached out and touched her face weakly. "I poisoned you from the start. Later on, I found out that Yuan Xian did not do anything else to me. You also succeeded in your rebellion, but my poison is incurable. Lu Xinglan looked at her with reddened eyes. It was as though he was looking at an enemy. Wei Wei Bai slowly used her fingers to touch the flowers by her temples. She lowered her eyes and said softly, I also want to stop. I don't want to die. After all, I have kept my chastity. If I don't touch you, I'll feel guilty. However, I found out that not only is the poison incurable, but if I don't continue to eat, I will suffer the pain of burning my heart every day. My entire body will start to fester. At this point, she paused for a moment before continuing. Although it can let me live longer, what's the point? I love beauty so much that I really don't want to die an ugly death. This was the truth. She died beautifully. She could not live an ugly life. This was the belief that terminal facial cancer patients defended. At this point, Wei Wei Bai turned her body slightly and smiled sweetly. Although the time was short, I was very happy. She snuggled into his embrace gently. After all, I've also caused a lot of trouble. It's good to be pampered by a tyrant. Her voice became faint. It's a pity that good days are always fleeting. You are a hero, not a tyrant. You shouldn't be a fatuous one either. Her words gradually became softer. I worship you, young master. When I was young, I always wanted to meet you and tell you that you are my faith. All the beauty in this world can't compare to you. If I could meet you, even if I only had one day left in my life, I would have profited. She was like a little girl, saying silly things. His voice was extremely weak. His body was abnormally cold. The girl's beautiful face was incomparably pale. His true chi was also useless. He could only hug her with all his strength, hoping that she could stay a little longer. He couldn't even bear to interrupt her. Even if he could barely hear her voice, he could only vaguely hear her say something. That's why you're my best young master, not a fatuous ruler. Lu Xinglan hugged her tightly and finally said in a trembling voice, Are you stupid? You're really stupid. How could he die for such a ridiculous reason? It was just that he was snatched into the palace. Even if her reputation was tarnished, even if she was with another man, so what? He didn't want to be a hero. He only wanted to be her foolish ruler. How could she let him not fulfill his wish? Lu Xinglan gritted her teeth and buried her head in her shoulder. Her skin was starting to turn cold, but he acted as if he didn't know. Don't make me hate you. If you use such a ridiculous reason to leave me, I will hate you. This kind of reason for leaving was too stupid. It wasn't worth it. To protect his body, she had been slowly committing suicide. He didn't admit this sacrifice. He didn't admit it. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 100. The imperial doctor ran over with a medicine bowl, but suddenly stopped. Then his whole body trembled, and the medicine bowl fell to the ground. Everyone in the imperial hospital knelt down almost at the same time. Your Majesty, my condolences. Lu Xinglan didn't raise her head. She still held her in a stubborn posture, like a child snuggling up to her. She didn't dare to change her posture at all, as if she could stay a little longer like this. Slash. Chapter 2887. This time, there was no problem with the space-time tunnel. Wei Wei Bai stayed for a week before leaving. Because the price of the poison bought from the supermarket was detected to be illegally increased, she was punished to refund all the customers who bought the product. The system needed to fill in the product evaluation and refund application form. Then it would be sent to the supermarket to let the supermarket confirm that the customers who used it could get a refund. These were all done by the system. The poison had 15 life points, although the system and Wei Wei Bai were calm and felt that this was a small amount of money. But was a small amount of money not money? Was a small amount of life points not life points? Anyway, when waiting for the refund, there was nothing to do in the plane. Wei Wei Bai leisurely turned into a wandering ghost, following behind Lu Xinglan. Lu Xinglan hugged her corpse from morning to night, and from night to the next day. Wei Wei Bai wanted to smash this dog's head. The corpse would rot if she carried it any longer. She didn't want to see herself rot. Ugly. Fortunately, Xian Wu, who was commanding the army at the border, came back. When he came, he seemed to give a perfunctory bow, then got up, walked behind Lu Xinglan, raised his hand, and knocked. Lu Xinglan fainted. Perfect. Wei Wei Bai calmly clapped to the side. This was how it should be. She was already dead. What was wrong with hugging a corpse? If she didn't bury her, she would see her rotten face. She refused to see such a terrible scene. In the future, when the side missions threatened her with disfigurement of her soul every day, she would automatically take the rotten corpse. How big of a shadow would that be? Xin Wu was indeed a perfect general to handle things. From washing clothes, cooking, and cleaning the stable, to leading the army, fighting, and governing, he was perfectly competent. After knocking Lu Xinglan out, he looked at Bai Weiwei's corpse, dressed in fine clothes, quietly lying there with drooping eyes. The girl's face was pink, and her 10 fingers hung weakly from her sleeves. Xin Wu was silent for 3 seconds, then turned to the eunuch beside him and said, "Cover the body with brocade, scatter flowers, open the way for the imperial concubine," and then his tone deepened a bit. "A grand funeral. She will enter the emperor's bedroom in the imperial mausoleum. His Majesty will be buried with her 100 years later." These words were treasonous. His Majesty was not dead yet, but he was already cursing. But Xin Wui's face was indifferent, and he didn't care at all. Then he brushed past Wei Wei Bai and expressionlessly picked up the unconscious Lu Xinglan and walked out. Wei Wei Bai had no choice but to follow along. Xin Wu was simply a heartwarming little angel. He didn't need to see his rotten face. Furthermore, she was buried with a head full of flowers. She was beautiful even in death. Wei Wei Bai was very satisfied. Then, she saw Xin Wu kick Lu Xinglan out and pour ice water on her. Clean and quick, one basin after another. The large ice cubes that the eunuchs and palace maids brought in were all crushed by Xin Wu and smashed onto Lu Xinglan's head. This scene was too ruthless. Wei Wei Bai ate a piece of chocolate. It was the sole chocolate given by the system. It's good for her to eat. She squatted down and watched as she ate. This was the only inconvenience in this plane. She had to be tied to the target. Even if Lu Xinglan was a corpse, she was still awakened by Xin Wu. He sat up. His bone-chilling eyes were slightly sideways. His face was pale, but his expression was calm. Xin Wu put down the wooden bucket and said, "You're used to the border. You like the cold. You'll feel better if I give you some cold water." Lu Xinglan didn't say anything. His eyes were fixed, and it seemed like they wouldn't move. The blood vessels in his eyes were unusually obvious, adding a bit of ruthlessness and embarrassment to his gaze. / you'll see it the next time you open the bookshelf, if you like. Chapter 2888. He said softly, "I want Yuan Xian to die." It was all his fault. He was the one who made her commit suicide. Xin Wu saw that he had recovered, but the first thing he wanted to do was torture others. This was understandable. After all, if he didn't find something to do, he would be useless. Lu Xinglan was only trying to save himself. He was desperately looking for other things to distract himself from Wei Wei Bai's death. Xin Wu narrowed his eyes slightly and said calmly, "The last thing the Empress did before she died was to arrange a good place for the abolished Emperor. You want to go against her last wish." Lu Xinglan lowered his eyes and sat on the ground in a daze. Finally, the corners of his mouth twitched. He revealed an ugly sneer. Then he said hoarsely, "That's good. It's better that he's alive." Xin Wu was speechless when he saw his retarded expression. Lu Xinglan also fell silent. The atmosphere between the two of them was very bad. Wei Wei Bai had a calm expression as she ate her chocolate. Finally, Lu Xinglan stood up. He supported himself with one hand on the ground. His whole body was on the verge of collapse, but he still forced himself to stand up. Then he walked forward step by step. He saw the palace maids spread baskets of flowers on the brocade and scattered the rest on the ground. She lay under the brocade, her beautiful face leaning against the flowers. She was exceptionally beautiful. Lu Xinglan looked at her for a long time. Finally, he reached out and picked up a flower. He put it in her hair and touched her face with his fingertips. Her cold skin was cold to his fingers. It was also cold to the heart. Lu Xinglan lowered his eyes and stared at her. After a long time, he slowly got up, as if all his energy had left him. He said weakly, "She loved to be beautiful. It's my fault. I shouldn't have left her for a few days. She should blame me for not burying her in her most beautiful appearance immediately after she died." After saying this, Lu Xinglan smiled. The corners of his mouth were too stiff. In the end, his smile didn't look like it at all. It looked more like he was crying. Finally, he reached out and swept the flowers, burying her face completely under them. "Bury her," he said softly. The next 3 days were a grand funeral. All kinds of ceremonies of the highest standards were held. Lu Xinglan didn't speak. He didn't even cry. After her death, she was also promoted in rank. She was buried as the Empress and entered the Imperial Mausoleum. After Wei Wei Bai finished the chocolate, she had nothing else to do. She could only hold the system's little toy. A small Rubik's Cube was spinning around. It wasn't fun, but it would kill time. How boring. The world after her death. Also, she was bored. After the burial, Lu Xinglan went to see Yuan Xian. He was still sitting in the cell drawing flowers. When he saw Lu Xinglan, he didn't say anything. She looked at him a little nervously for a while before going back to drawing. Lu Xinglan didn't have time to pay attention to him. He just calmly asked someone to drag him away. Yuan Xian finally became arrogant. "What? You want to kill me? Finally, you can't hold it in anymore. Lu Xinglan, you're just like this. You're showing your wild ambition." Lu Xinglan's expression was indifferent. She didn't even listen to what Yuan Xian said. A carriage stopped at the entrance of the dungeon. A few strong and powerful soldiers stood there. When they saw Yuan Xian being dragged out, the soldiers took a rope and tied him up. They were going to stuff him into the carriage. Yuan Xian saw the carriage and sneered. "You're going to transport me out of the palace and kill me. Are you afraid that Wei Wei will see me?" The abolished emperor's dungeon was very quiet, because no one dared to speak to him. They were afraid that they would be labeled as the abolished emperor's accomplice. That would be fatal. Therefore, he didn't know that Wei Wei Bai was dead. Lu Xinglan stared at him silently when he was pulled out of the dungeon by the carriage. Slash. Chapter 2889. He finally said, "Before I regret it, go to Jiangnan and stay there." She said that she wanted this kid to be a rich idler in Jiangnan. He would let him be. This was her last wish. Lu Xinglan was afraid that he would regret it. He almost reached out and crushed Yuan Xian's neck. At first, Lu Xinglan thought that he wouldn't be able to hold on. Later, he realized that whether he could or couldn't hold on was a luxury, because his heart was empty as if someone had bitten it off. He felt like he had become a scarecrow. How could a scarecrow have the energy to think about whether he was good or not? He just did some things mechanically, and then slept and ate on time. The Northern Kingdom was almost done. Xian Wu also returned to the court and watched over him every day. Lu Xinglan didn't make anyone worry. For the first few days, he slept quietly. Wei Wei Bai also saw that his predecessor had died. He walked out quickly. A week was up. It happened to be late at night. When Lu Xinglan was sleeping, 15 days of life value was successfully refunded. She sat on the chair and watched the man on the bed sleep. His face was unusually pale. Since the day she died, his face had not returned to normal. He also became thin, even if he ate no less than before. But he just started to lose weight uncontrollably. Strangely, the flesh on his face began to decrease. In less than a week, the outline of his face became clearer, and his pair of dark eyes were fierce and sinister. His prestige grew. It made the civil and military officials even more afraid. Wei Wei Bai stared at his sleeping face and yawned herself. She said to the system, "Then let's go." 100 favorability didn't cause too much of an impact on him, so she didn't have any psychological burden. She was most afraid of those who were desperate for love. Although he loved her to 100. But if she died, he could forget her and live well. Wei Wei Bai felt relieved. The system nodded and reached out to carry her. He was now in his youth state. His beautiful red hair had grown a lot and fluttered behind him. A beautiful tang suit floated up as he gently hugged Wei Wei Bai's soul. The passage opened. What greeted him was a breeze of energy. He lowered his eyes, and the color of his eyes began to turn deep red. Red dots of light scattered around him, just as he was about to step into the passageway. Suddenly, she heard the man behind her start to convulse. He did not wake up. Instead, he was having a nightmare. Wei Wei, don't go, don't leave me. His eyes were tightly shut, and his face was extremely pale. Tears rolled down from the corners of his eyes. He was so weak that it was hopeless. He was so hopeless that people felt that it would be better for him to die than to be like this. The system calmly looked back. He hugged the soul in his arms. Then, he lowered his head and stepped into the tunnel without any hesitation. He passed through reincarnation again and again. Time and time again, he had sent her to his side, snatching away his fate and snatching away his lifespan. It maintained her life force and changed her fate. It even allowed her to change her fate of being weak and dying at any time in every reincarnation cycle. This was what the system was doing. At first, the system only wanted to help her fight for a bit of her lifespan. Later on, he wanted to go against the heavens and change his fate. He wanted to change her life. The host's fate was very bad. No matter how she was reincarnated, she would be seriously ill. She would always be seriously ill, and when she met a villain, both her parents would die. She would die a short life and not have a good ending. And Yi Yuxuan was a terrible extreme. She was the child of destiny that the main system paid special attention to in the system world. /full text download. Chapter 2890. He only needed a little bit of luck. If he gave it to her, she could completely change her fate. Let her live a long life. Let her have both good fortune, and let her die a good life. And this small loss of luck had no effect on Yi Yuxuan himself. The divinity in his body would not be shaken at all. But it was too difficult to take away this luck. It could only continuously shake Yi Yuxuan's emotions, desperately destroy his indifference, and use methods that were almost mutual destruction to make him open his heart to the host. They would stomp on him a few times. It would make his luck overflow. The system sighed in the end. It did not want to torture Yi Yuxuan like this. It really did not want to torture him like this. It could not open Yi Yuxuan's heart. It could not get any trace of luck. So to say, the host spent so much effort to torture him because he was asking for it. This time, Yi Yuxuan did not follow. The system knew that it was because the length of the plane was different, which caused Yi Yuxuan's soul to wake up at different times. It was rare to be able to carry the host all the way. The system ran forward happily. He felt that he was a male system like the wind. It was good to have long legs. He would not step on his trousers. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks. Wait, there was no Yi Yuxuan's human soul following him. Then what about the divinity that was guarding the door of reality? The crazy Yi Yuxuan. That guy pinched the host's little doll every day as if he had a grudge. Every time, he would drag the host to his side. If the host went, she would die. He stopped in his tracks. It was better to go back and wait for Yi Yuxuan to wake up before leaving. But before he could take 2 steps, he suddenly felt that it was a little difficult to walk, then he looked down and saw that the red line on his soul was tight again, as if it was being pulled by someone. It cannot be. The system's mouth twitched. There was still a long way to go. That crazy golden eye's strength was so great. He slowly took a few steps back, suddenly accelerated, and desperately retreated. But it was too late. His strength could not compare to this terrible pull. In the next moment, the white ball of soul in his arms flew up. The system felt that it could still struggle a little more. He hugged the soul tightly with both hands, but he didn't dare to pull it away. He was afraid that he would injure the host's soul. He finally saw the boundary of reality. At the entrance, a large area of bones had already spread out. A faint golden energy glowed at the border. The system's pupils constricted as it saw an inconceivable phenomenon. The man stood on the white bone, his long hair draped over his shoulders. Deep within his golden eyes, there was an incomparable deathly stillness. His exquisite face was devoid of any human warmth. There was only a kind of coldness that bordered on holy as it looked at him indifferently. This was the power of a god, the deterrence of a god. The system began to panic. He took a deep breath and felt that he was going to die here today. Because he couldn't beat this big shot. He was even afraid of a human like Yi Yuxuan, not to mention divinity. Just as the system knew that it had no other choice, it decided to take a risk. The pulling force of his soul lessened. He hugged Wei Tuanzi tightly. He saw that the man had lowered his eyes, and his eyes were extremely cold. He raised his hand and passed through the dark boundary. A golden light shone. From the land of bones, he came to the crack of reality. His fair fingers were perfect and flawless. His fingertips were wrapped around the red line. It was unbelievably gorgeous. The system looked at him defensively. It was afraid that he would snatch the ball in its arms. But in the next second, it was stunned. The man's fingertips gently landed on the ball of soul. In the middle of the ball, there was a sleeping girl curled up quietly. She knew nothing. The young man with divinity lowered his eyes indifferently and silently stared at her for a long time. Finally, his fingertips moved slowly. He touched the soul lightly and was extremely careful. It was as if he was touching a precious and fragile treasure. Slash. Chapter 2891. The system's body stiffened, not daring to move. It was afraid that the other party's power would tear the host's soul apart. It could only stare at the man in front of it, slowly lowering his head. On his pale face, the golden eyes were still cold. He seemed to be acting instinctively. His slender and beautiful fingers almost passed through the white light to touch the little girl in the middle. The system's pupils suddenly constricted. Its red hair flared up, flames burning. Its eyes turned red, flames igniting in the middle of its pupils. This was a state of desperation for a fight. The white light was the light of Wei Wei Bai's soul. Passing through the light itself was hurting Wei Wei Bai's soul. If this guy's fingers passed through the white light, then it would be a terrible injury to the host. Just as the system was about to retreat at all costs and confront this guy, suddenly, the other party seemed to have realized something. The cold and exquisite puppet fingertips paused. The soft light was as fragile as tofu at his fingertips. It was as if she would shatter with a touch. Too weak. He lowered his long and narrow eyelashes, and a strange fluctuation appeared in his empty eyes. Then he retracted his fingers, silently staring at the fragile soul, as if thinking about how to touch her without hurting her. The system felt that this guy in front of it not only had a problem, but a big problem. He was blocking here to annoy the system and the host. And not just once, but every time. Wasn't it just stealing a little bit of luck? It didn't affect him much. Couldn't he let go of this pair of pitiful old friends? They were already so miserable. Treating them as beggars, this man was rich and generous, giving them a single cent to send them away. It was enough for the host to eat and drink for many lifetimes. In the end, they worked so hard to scrape food from him, but did not get a single cent, only a single cent. This big brother was thinking of coming here to annoy them every day. This stinginess knows no bounds. The system despised Yi Yuxuan from the beginning to the end. It tried to take a step back. In the end, the man in front of it, who was as quiet as a god, also slowly took a step forward. Don't tell me you want to follow me to the real world? The system's face was full of, oh, your grandpa. Get away from me. Don't come any closer. If you come any closer, I'm going to risk my life. Suddenly, as if sensing something, he quietly raised his eyes and looked at the endless road behind the system. Then, he lowered his eyes and stared blankly at the soul ball. He seemed to be thinking about something. However, his brain capacity seemed to be insufficient, and he couldn't think of anything. He just stood there, his expression so calm that it was almost frozen. His golden eyes were incomparably desolate. Then, he turned around and walked step by step towards the land of bones. It was a world made of countless bones, filled with endless desolation and death. He sat back down on the throne of bones and quietly lowered his eyes. There was not a trace of emotion on his beautiful face. He supported his cheek with one hand and leaned against the chair while the other hand rested on the chair. In the middle of his finger, there was a golden ring. Below the ring was a knot made of golden energy. Under the knot, a small doll swayed. It was Wei Bai's cute little doll. It was also created by the system for the host. Then, he snatched her away and kept her company. The system didn't care at all that the doll it made was snatched away. It had a lot and even embroidered a portrait of the host and pasted it in the space. At https://www.sashu.com/full text at https://www.sashu.com download text at https://www.sashu.com at https://m.sashu.com/. Chapter 2892. After all, she was its host, and it had to support her. The host said that she was the most beautiful person in the world, although it didn't think so. But to not make the host sad, it embroidered a picture for her and made her stick it in the biggest and most conspicuous place. It told the host that she was the most beautiful host. Sticking her picture on the wall was an affirmation of her beauty. After all, the host was the first one who liked to be praised. In the past, all the hosts would praise them for their strength and ability. To a certain extent, the host was actually very easy to coax. The system happily opened the door to reality and went out. As for why the crazy Yushuan was going crazy, he was crazy, so it was normal for him to go crazy. After the system stuffed the soul back into the host's body, it sighed faintly, then picked up the pink strawberry brand yogurt and drank it. It was tired. It had to eat more to make up for it. Just as it drank a few mouthfuls of yogurt, it suddenly saw the man lying beside the host and faintly opened his eyes. Yushuan was back. The system didn't think much and was about to hide, but it found that in the middle of the pair of faintly opened eyes, there was a thick golden light and a strange aura of death. His pair of deathly, still eyes slowly moved. When he turned his face, dark strands of hair fell to the side of his face, making his face look even paler. He quietly looked at the girl beside him for a while, then gently lowered his fine eyelashes and finally closed his eyes. From the moment he opened his eyes to the moment he closed them again, it was only a few seconds. The system was stunned for a long time, then stiffly picked up the yogurt and continued drinking. That was divinity awakening. Even if it was only a few seconds, it was very scary, because once the divinity awakened, the human Yushuan would be swallowed up. At that time, don't talk about the feelings now, even a memory would be gone. The host wanted to face a divinity, Yi Yushuan, who was heartless, emotionless, and had no memory of her. When the time came, she would have to fish for favorability points, luck, and life points from this guy. It would become an extremely difficult task, so difficult that it was impossible. What was even more frightening was if humanity was swallowed up. Only the original divine, Yi Yushuan, was left. Even if he had the power of the system, he would not be able to go against Yi Yushuan. Don't even talk about attacking his emotional fragments. Those fragments will disappear. All the small worlds collapsed. They would not have any chance to cross over to another plane. The system finished drinking the yogurt and pinched the yogurt box. The host's life points were still too low, although he had lived many more years than before. But after working hard for so long, he couldn't even get a good beginning and a good ending. He was unwilling to accept this. The color of the fireworks in his eyes reappeared. Then, the system opened its palm, and a seal with complicated patterns appeared on its palm. It looked up at Wei Bai's head. The golden feathers fluttered in the wind. The enormous fate roulette had existed since ancient times, and it still looked down upon all living beings. The seal in the system's palm slowly entered between Yi Yushuan's eyebrows. This was a seal that suppressed the awakening of divinity. This was also the system's most risky struggle. Suddenly, The roulette wheel spun slightly. The golden light of nothingness fell into the seal. The complicated and huge seal patterns began to dissolve. The system watched as more than half of its power was eliminated. Only a small portion of it entered his body. The system looked helpless and wrapped its short arms around its chest. It became small again. Only 3 years left. So much of its power was eliminated by the power of the golden roulette. It didn't know how long it could delay the divinity. Hopefully, everything would go smoothly. Otherwise, it would have to predict the time of the divinity's awakening. Because the divinity without emotions, Yi Yuxuan would automatically take back all of the host's luck. By then, it would really be a waste of effort. The little system suddenly saw Yi Yuxuan's eyelashes tremble again. Damn it again. The man opened his eyes calmly, but looked to the side. He found the girl lying quietly beside him. He looked at her quietly for a while, then reached out and hugged her into his arms. His thin lips kissed her soft face. It was as if he had found the warmth he wanted. He narrowed his eyes in satisfaction, buried his head in her shoulder, and sighed faintly. This sigh was filled with endless loneliness and a sad life. It was like a dream, but it was also real pain. It was all gone. He didn't know if something had gone wrong. This time, he didn't immediately leave that world and catch up with her. Instead, he lived in that world for 20 years. /T. Chapter 2893. The beautiful concubine of the female general. The cold snow covered the city, and the red tiles were covered with frost. The eunuchs carefully used floor heating and various charcoal fires to dry dozens of pots of flowers. Recently, His Majesty's temper had been unusually irritable. Everyone lived until their necks were cold. Although it could be said that since the death of Empress Yuan, this palace had become a dead city. No new people entered, and no palace maid could be promoted. The only thing His Majesty was passionate about was political affairs. They had heard more than once that some bold woman wanted to touch His Majesty and was dragged out to be executed. Later, they found out that His Majesty was disgusted by any woman. There was even a palace maid who couldn't bear this lonely and mediocre life. She actually secretly touched the sleeping His Majesty when she was on night watch. She was kicked out by His Majesty. But that palace maid touched his finger, making him feel disgusted and unable to eat for a few days. Only then did they realize, why was Empress Yuan so respected and favored, and why His Majesty even fought for the country for her. It turned out that His Majesty didn't like the women in this world. They were all untouchable and even disgusted, and the only woman he could get close to had already passed away. The chief eunuch carefully held a pot of peony flowers that bloomed in the cold winter. This peony is good. It's glorious and pleasing. His Majesty will definitely be happy when he sees it. The female official walked over and said calmly, His Majesty still likes flowers that can be made into rouge. If we take those that can be made into rouge, His Majesty will ask for them. The eunuchs immediately brought the flowers over. Those palace maids, under the guidance of the female official, took out small baskets and carefully picked the flowers one by one. His Majesty loved this one. Even if it cost money and manpower to grow flowers in winter, they were willing to do so. The officials also felt that it was very normal for His Majesty to have this hobby, and they were happy to see it. The wise emperor that appeared once in 100 years started a new era of prosperity. He didn't have any hobbies, and he just focused on political affairs to the end. Moreover, he burned a midnight oil every day and didn't rest. If such a wise emperor didn't give him some hobbies and let him rest, how could this group of officials have the nerve to rest? They were tired to death. They were really tired to death. It was not a description of a certain state. The palace maids took the flower baskets and stopped outside the bedroom. The eunuchs came to take them. Now, women were not allowed to get close to Her Majesty. Even if they saw her, they would have to salute her from afar. The eunuch placed the flowers on the table. The row of flowers looked exceptionally lovely in the middle of winter. Inside the bedroom, there was a wall of shelves on which beautiful boxes were placed. They all hid rouge. When the eunuchs heard the sound of the emperor returning to the palace, They immediately went out to pay their respects. In the heavy snow, Xian Wu held an oil paper umbrella and stood behind the man expressionlessly. Lu Xinglan's expression was indifferent. He wore a black cloak, and time had not left many traces on his face. It was just that there were some sparse, white hairs hidden in his hair. 10 years of time had made him even calmer, more reserved and colder. Xian Wu looked up and saw the few strands of white hair in his hair. He was silent for a moment, but he couldn't say anything to advise him. This white hair was still too young for Lu Xinglan's age. But when she thought about how he had been living with the mentality of torturing himself to death all these years, she couldn't help but think about it. He also felt that this white hair was too little. If his body were to torment him like this, not to mention white hair, his corpse would have been buried in a grave. Lu Xinglan had been at the border in his early years, and his body had been tempered to toughness. To make it easier for you to read next time, you can click. Chapter 2894. This toughness made his body very strong. He could not easily torture himself to death. When he entered the bedroom, he saw a row of flower baskets on the table. Lu Xinglan's indifferent eyes finally showed a trace of fluctuation. He came to the table and reached out to untie his cloak. Xian Wu, who had just walked in after putting away his umbrella, naturally reached out to take his clothes and put them on a shelf at the side. After putting away the clothes, Xian Wu went to make tea. The emperor's bedroom was cold. Places where flowers were kept were much more comfortable than here. This place was cold and cheerless all year round. In winter, they were not allowed to heat the floor. There were charcoal fires. When Xian Wu came in, he did not take off his outer robe because it was too cold. It was snowing outside, and the windows were open. When he looked up, he could see the red walls and green tiles painted with snow. It was very beautiful. It was just fucking cold. And Lu Xinglan, who took off his outer robe, was wearing a white robe with a light golden belt with exquisite dragon patterns. The harem was too lonely. Even the embroiderers and weavers were too salty. There were few people in the harem, and there were no female masters. Who could they serve? They could only do their best to embroider on Lu Xinglan's clothes and make them look as exquisite and beautiful as possible. They were all just passing time. Lu Xinglan sat by the window and reached out to hold the window higher. The snow outside immediately flew in. He did not look cold at all. He lowered his eyes and began to make rouge. The red flower juice was finally ground out. Xian Wu was expressionless. He was used to this. He put a cup of hot tea beside Lu Xinglan, then made himself another cup to drink. Drink it while it was hot. Cold tea hurt the stomach. He was now at the age where he needed to maintain his health. Xian Wu took a sip of tea and said calmly, as if he had thought of something, "The crippled emperor is dead. After 10 years, he finally died." Lu Xinglan was unmoved. His beautiful fingertips touched the flower juice and stained a trace of red on his nails. Xian Wu, after eating poisonous rouge for 10 years, slowly torturing yourself to death is also a kind of ability. The crippled emperor, who was sent to Jiangnan, finally found out one day that the girl he had snatched committed suicide with rouge. It was said that the crippled emperor collapsed that day and vomited blood until everyone thought that he could not be saved. After that, he struggled for several months before barely recovering. Xian Wu had been paying attention to Waste Emperor. He was waiting for him to go against Lu Xinglan and find something for her to do, so that he could relieve his depressed state of being a dead person. In the end, the Waste Emperor started to make rouge and ate it bit by bit. The rouge was poisonous and had been put there on purpose. Not much, just a little. It was like a young girl applying rouge to her lips. The Waste Emperor also started to put on makeup, using a lot of lipstick. She was even putting a flower in her hair. However, he was wearing a man's robe, which was neither fish nor fowl, as if he had gone mad. Wasn't that crazy? Xian Wu thought that he was enduring hardships to gain some courage. He wanted to play the fool and quietly accumulate his strength so that he could regain the throne. But he saw that he had been crazy the whole time. He was so stupid that he received the news of his death yesterday. Lu Xinglan filtered the flower juice, her eyes incomparably cold. Then he glanced sideways and looked at Xin Wu coldly. He died quickly and easily. He was willing to let Yuan Xian live. He just didn't want to let him off too easily. Why should he stay in this world without her? The girl he loved was gone. He was the culprit, because he made her commit suicide, and Yuan Xian was that accomplice. Because he made her have suicidal thoughts. Both of them would die a horrible death. Otherwise, how could he be worthy of her loneliness lying alone in the mausoleum? The Waste Emperor's death was just a sentence. //. Chapter 2895. Lu Xinglan lowered her head and continued to make the rouge. This was the only thing she liked. After Xin Wu finished his tea and put down the cup, he picked up Lu Xinglan's cup of cold tea and splashed it out of the window. Then Xin Wu made another cup of hot tea and continued to put it beside Lu Xinglan. He made sure that the tea was hot before he drank it. Over the years, the matters at the border had been settled. The Northern Kingdom had also been destroyed. Everything in the Northern Kingdom had been settled and tasks had been assigned in an orderly manner. To Lu Xinglan, these achievements and great deeds were nothing more than political affairs. It seemed that over the years, nothing could move Lu Xinglan and make him smile. Xin Wu looked up at the bedroom. It was empty and cold. White snow flew in from the window. It landed on Lu Xinglan's hair. The snowy color made his features even more exquisite and cold, but also more lonely. Xin Wu stood silently at the side and would occasionally talk about some political affairs. It was mixed with some humorous jokes. This was the result of practice. After all, Lu Xinglan had not laughed for too long. It was a pity that he did not have a talent for humor. After so many years, there was no joke that could make Lu Xinglan laugh. Lu Xinglan put the red rouge on a piece of paper, carefully wrapped it, and put it back into the box of rouge. Then he picked up the teacup and took a sip slowly. It was hot. He looked at the snow outside the window and suddenly said, "The Crown Prince is already qualified for this position." 10 years ago, he gathered all the distant branches of the Lu family on a certain day. Most of the nearby branches of the Lu family were dead. There were no children of suitable age. Therefore, the best way was to choose from the distant branches. Lu Xinglan used some testing methods and chose an 8-year-old child. Over the years, apart from dealing with political affairs, he spent some of his time on nurturing this child. 10 years wasn't enough time for an 18-year-old child to become an emperor who could open up new territories. But it was enough to guard this country. Xin Wu was a little stunned when he heard his words. "You plan to give up this position? This position of guarding the country, guarding the people, and being regarded as a god?" Lu Xinglan's cold eyes were lonely. He glanced sideways at the rouge on the wall. Suddenly, he smiled faintly, because it had been too long since he smiled. The corners of his mouth stiffened. "I'm tired." It was a faint sentence, and there was not much pain in it. But it gave people a kind of indifference that was so deep that it hurt to the bone. Xin Wu looked at him in silence. His eyes suddenly turned a little red. He sighed, but couldn't say anything. Lu Xinglan lowered her eyes and rubbed the teacup with her fingers, feeling the little bit of warmth that warmed her cold fingertips. "She wanted me to be a hero, so I did." He only wanted to be her hero, but she didn't. She said that if he hadn't been so powerful as to protect this country, she would have died a long time ago, and she would not have met him. So what she liked was his heroic side. Lu Xinglan put down the teacup and leaned against the chair tiredly. Her eyes were half covered with indifference. "I want to leave." Xin Wu did not say anything. He saw Wei Xiaobao looking out the window with a calm expression. Heavy snow flew in and landed all over Lu Xinglan. This place was too cold. It was too lonely. Xin Wu felt that it was fine. That was good. After enduring for 10 years, it was time for him to rest. He was too tired. Abdication, the succession of a new emperor, everything was logical. Under Lu Xinglan's pressure, no one dared to refute any of his decisions. On the day of the new emperor's succession, the bell rang incessantly. The civil and military officials' celebratory voices were unusually lively. // Chapter 2896. At the palace gate, a man carrying a bag walked out unhurriedly. Xin Wu held an oil paper umbrella and waited at the door. Snowflakes fell on the man. He saw Xin Wu. Go back. Xin Wu was silent for a moment, but he smiled. I'm tired too. He was such a high-ranking official. He had done so many big things. He was tired. The man looked at him indifferently and then said calmly, Follow me. I won't give you food. Xin Wu walked behind him unhurriedly and held the oil paper umbrella over his head. He walked all the way. He followed all the way. Lu Xinglan's ultimate goal was the empty, newly built emperor tomb. He built a small thatched house not far from his emperor tomb. He guarded her in the tomb. She said, Young master, I'll guard your tomb after you die. But she didn't say what to do if she died early. Perhaps at that time, she felt that she was a few years younger than him. Lu Xinglan sat in front of the tomb and quietly took out the rouge she made. Do you like it? The reply was endless silence. Lu Xinglan didn't care. Instead, he began to burn joss paper for her. The snow pressed down on the city, pressed down on him, and coldly burned the fingers of the joss paper. She was dead. He also guarded her tomb, burned joss paper for her, and thought of her. It was slow, but it also seemed to be fast. He guarded for 10 years. One day, Xin Wu came back with a food box. He saw Lu Xinglan lying on the chair with a calm expression, as if she was asleep. Xin Wu looked at her for a while before putting down the food box. What kind of coffin do you like? I'll pick it for you. Xin Wu said to Lu Xinglan. Lu Xinglan didn't say anything. Xin Wu sighed in understanding. It was good. He had guarded the tomb for so long. He was tired. It was time to look for her. When they came to guard the tomb, it was snowing in the city. And when Lu Xinglan went to look for her, it was the summer heat. It was the season to meet her. The lake was full of lotus flowers. The girl was in a lotus flower field, smiling sweetly and beautiful. Yi Yuxuan quietly buried his face in her hair, feeling the trembling of her pulse and the young girl's fresh breath. The loneliness was slowly dispelled. She had been guarding the promise of her favorite hero for 10 years. 10 years of guarding a lonely grave. 10 years of life and death. Looking back, the road was full of loneliness. Fortunately, he was back. Yi Yuxuan closed her eyes and whispered, Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai, what's wrong? Yi Yuxuan, after a moment of silence, he released her slightly and raised his eyes to look up. He saw Bai Weiwei open her eyes and calmly look at him. Yi Yuxuan slowly blinked and said softly, Are you hungry? He had slept for 3 days, even though he had been injected with nutrition injections. But his stomach was empty. In this state of deep sleep, her body was actually very weak. But every time she woke up, she could feel that her body was in a much better condition. In fact, Weiwei Bai was not very hungry. After all, she did not feel hungry when her stomach was too empty. But she should be hungry. Thinking of Yi Yuxuan's cooking, Weiwei Bai really wanted to touch the corner of her mouth, afraid that her saliva would be discovered. Yi Yuxuan got up and pulled the blanket down for her. Don't get up yet. You slept for too long and need to let your body adapt. Weiwei Bai felt that her body was as strong as an ox, but she still nodded obediently. Yi Yuxuan got out of bed and casually grabbed a coat and put it on himself. Bai Changyan and Qin Xiu should be coming. Once the 3 days were up, the two of them would definitely appear. Qin Xiu would bring a nurse and medical equipment to the house once a day. When he was asleep, it was intermittent, so he would wake up at a fixed time and fall asleep again. This feeling was very mysterious. It was like knowing that you were still in that world, but your body automatically woke up to do things in this world. The two sides were unrelated to each other. Yi Yuxuan went to wash up first. Just as he was wiping his face, he suddenly paused. Then he slowly raised his head, and a little gold appeared in his black eyes. An unusually strange and deathly gold. This was that person's eyes. Yi Yuxuan looked at it indifferently and blinked. But he saw the gold flash and disappear again. He slowly lowered his eyes and was silent for a moment. Then he put down the towel and went to cook. Wei Wei was hungry. Chapter 2897. When Yi Yuxuan was cooking, Qin Xiu and Bai Changyan happily came to the door. They came with a pile of vegetables and snacks. In the kitchen, two cooking aunties were washing vegetables. The man who was cooking rolled up his white sleeves, exposing his fingers, and was seriously cutting vegetables. He glanced indifferently at his father-in-law, his future father-in-law, and Wei Wei's attending doctor. Then he slanted his eyes and pursed his thin lips. Obviously, there was not much expression, but it made people feel unusually scared. Sure enough, Qin Xiu, who was carrying snacks, and Bai Changyan, who was carrying vegetables, paused for a moment. Like a quail meeting a tiger. They felt like they would die if they moved. Then the two put things on the table and automatically took out the snacks. With a miserable expression, they threw a big bag of chips into the trash can. Yi Yuxuan cut the radish, picked up the lid, and threw it into the pork rib soup. The soup gurgled and clouded his eyes. It was cold and impersonal. Qin Xiu immediately understood. He glanced at Bai Changyan, who also understood. Then he threw a bag of chocolate biscuits into the trash can. Yi Yuxuan took out a knife and began to cut the meat. The tip of the knife slowly cut the beef with a fierce and terrible momentum. The two flattened their mouths and reluctantly threw a bag of candies into the trash can. Thump! The knife was used a little too much, and the beef was cut in half. Yi Yuxuan expressionlessly picked up the knife and looked at it. The two finally threw the whole bag of snacks into the trash can. Then they saw Yi Yuxuan's expression soften a little. Wei Wei had already washed up, wearing home clothes and cotton slippers, and came to the kitchen door. A group of people did not let her enter the kitchen. She did not feel anything and stood at the door. She crossed her arms and poked her head in. She saw Yi Yuxuan expressionlessly kick the trash can. The lid of the trash can was closed. He didn't know how much rubbish he had thrown in, but the lid was still half closed, and it looked like it couldn't be closed. Then she saw the idiot duo. No, the family duo. Old father. He was a distant relative of Yi Yuxuan. Yi Yuxuan's relatives were also her relatives. Therefore, Wei Wei slowly raised her hand and bent her fingers as a greeting gesture. Hello, are you here for dinner? The two relatives turned their heads at the same time. Their eyes were filled with hidden bitterness. Wei Wei, it was just a greeting. Why did he have such an expression? Then, Bai Changyan smiled and immediately walked over. Wei Wei, you're awake. How are you feeling? Qin Xiu immediately squeezed in and wanted to escape from the kitchen immediately. Come, let me examine you. Wei Wei calmly raised her hand and stopped the two strangely passionate guys from approaching her. Why did he feel like he was up to no good? She tiptoed and glanced at the man who was seriously cooking. The man, who had always been indifferent and inhuman, was standing in a pile of pots and pans, wearing a homely apron. The smoke from the fire dyed his beautiful eyelashes. He looked up and met her peeking eyes. The man's indifferent eyes suddenly had a soft and warm color. He pursed his lips and smiled. It was just a smile that was almost impossible to see at the corner of his lips. But it was so good-looking that it made Wei Wei stunned. She tiptoed and slowly returned to the ground. Then, she reached out and rubbed her face, trying to make her face not so hot. This was against the rules. The inhuman man had a bit more of a soft humanity. It was simply killing her. And you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.